Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 2022 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Michelle Yeoh won for her performance in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. But why did she beat fellow nominees Cate Blanchett, Ana de Armas, Andrea Riseborough, and Michelle Williams? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 95th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which covered the films of 2022. We'll be discussing how Michelle Yeoh won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today is a pretty great guy, if I do say so myself. You heard him introducing this Best Actress series with me way back in 2021. And he also joined me for a Best Actress episode for 1987, Cher's win, a very good year. Now he's back to talk about another very exciting Best Actress race. My partner, welcome back, Sebastian Gronback.
I'm back on the show. Hello. Oof.
Yes.
Let me tell you, there's been a lot of watching Oscar movies for many, many years.
It has been a lot. It's been quite a journey.
Yes. Yes, we started all the way back with the recent Oscars, and then we went all the way to the beginning of the Oscars, and then we started back at the beginning Oscars and went all the way back to current day.
Yes, it's a boomerang.
Oof.
I don't know if I'm going to go back. But we'll see.
I don't think we're going all the way back again. I think now we'll pick and choose what we want to do.
Yes.
But
more on that.
We're here we're here in recent times.
Times that we both can remember very hopefully well, because it was only 2 years ago. I don't know if this is one kind of thing where it just flies out of your mind by the time the Oscars are done.
Well, we watched the show this morning.
Yes, we did.
So now I'm very fresh.
You're prepared
about how this
you
year
remember the
how
vibe.
this year went.
Yes,
I remember the vibe, and you know what? The vibe was pretty good.
Yes, the vibe was
certainly better than the previous year, which was bad.
Yeah, the vibes were movies are back. Top Gun, Avatar, Everything Everywhere. So
everyone was very excited because we were at the tail end of the pandemic, and the people were going to the movies again.
Well, before we talk 2022, let's talk Best Actress as a category. So on that very first episode, you told me your favorite Best Actress win of all time was, you gave me three, actually. You said Julia Roberts for Erin Brockovich, Cher for Moonstruck, which we talked about, and Natalie Portman for Black Swan. And then for your second one, you told me your favorite Best Actress lineup of all time was 1959, which was something that I don't think anyone else said during all this time. Simone Signoret's win. So now I'll ask, looking at the future, who do you think will win the Oscar for Best Actress at some point who hasn't already?
This one is easy. I'm just going to parrot what a lot of other people have said that have been on for the 3 times, which is obviously Saoirse Ronan is going to win an Oscar in lead in the next 5 years.
5 years?
That's me.
My God.
In the next 5 years, she will win Best Actress. It's me just putting it down on the plate, because she doesn't feel to me like an Amy Adams who gets nominated 7 times and never wins. Although her nomination totals are kind of stacking up right now, right?
Saoirse's, she has 4.
Yeah. I mean, like that's still quite a few for somebody her age.
Yeah. She's like 30 now, so she has plenty of time.
And it's not like the sort of thing where Jennifer Lawrence got a bunch of them like in very quick succession. Like Saoirse's nominations are more pretty spread out. She didn't get one this past year. The projects that she was in didn't really take off. Yeah. But I think in the next 5 years it'll happen. That's me just putting my stamp on that.
Very good. Yes. Hard to disagree with that. I don't think it'll be quite in the next 5 years, but I think she has, again, decades and decades of work ahead of her that she could easily win for, because I think the industry really loves Saoirse. So,
You know who else likes Saoirse?
who?
I do.
Okay.
I like Saoirse, but I've never met
Many
anybody,
such cases.
and in all my years of being involved or aware of what's going on in this, said, you know who I don't like? Saoirse Ronan.
I don't know if anyone said that.
Yeah.
Well, for my other question, on the flip side, you told me your most heartbreaking losses in this category were Glenn Close for Dangerous Liaisons, Anne Hathaway for Rachel Getting Married, and Cate Blanchett for Carol. Great picks there. And you said your most heartbreaking snub, speaking of which, was Amy Adams for Arrival. So now I'm curious, who is someone that you want to win Best Actress, if it could truly be anyone, even if you don't suspect they ever will?
You know, I thought about this a little bit, and the one that I came up with that I really hope wins, and I think is someone that's like always gonna maybe be on the bubble. I would like a win to happen for Kristen Stewart. I really like her work the last decade.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I like all the Olivier Assayas movies are really good.
Yes.
She's great in all of them. I love Personal Shopper. I think she's really great in Clouds of Sils Maria. I know that I know that Spencer is a movie that some people are like hot and cold on, but I like Spencer.
Mm-hmm.
I think she does a good job in Spencer. And she was in Love Lies Bleeding this past year, and I thought she was good in that as well. I think she's someone that is really willing to go out there and try different things, and I hope that one day it pays off for her.
And here's what I will say to that as well. I appreciate the fact that she is not necessarily chasing for an Oscar, but I think as we have seen perhaps with this win for Michelle Yeoh and a potential win in a few weeks for Demi Moore for The Substance, it doesn't always have to be for something that seems obvious on paper. And I think Kristen Stewart could be someone who just knocks out a very kind of off-the-wall, incredible performance that the industry gets behind. How about that?
Yep, I'd say so.
Yeah. Well, very good. Let's talk about this year at the Oscars. The 95th Academy Awards nominees were Cate Blanchett in Tar, Ana de Armas in Blonde, Andrea Riseborough in To Leslie, Michelle Williams in The Fabelmans, and Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once, with the winner being Michelle Yeoh. So before we break down these performances, you and I both watched all 5 of these films this past week together. I didn't really get a lot of your overall thoughts necessarily, wanted to save it for the show, but what was your overall takeaway from either watching some of these for the first time or rewatching them now, 2-3 years later?
This lineup has like 2 all-timers, like one really great performance, one performance that is fine, and another performance that is like not great.
Okay.
And I think like this is the sort of thing where it's very obvious which performances are which.
Perhaps.
Unless you're one of those crazy people that likes Blonde.
Well, there are dozens of them.
Okay, well, this is a good year. Definitely contains 2 performances that I think are some of the best of the past decade.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
we pretty much know which 2 you're talking about there. I kind of love this lineup, even though I didn't really feel that way when it happened. It was pretty obvious for months that this would likely be a battle between Cate Blanchett and Michelle Yeoh, and that is what it ended up being. But with the other 3 nominees, kind of a wild ride to get there. I felt really good about people like Viola Davis at The Woman King and Danielle Deadwyler and Till getting in. They both did really well with Precursors. They both seemed like top tier performances of the year for people. And then to see them both miss was pretty heartbreaking. And we'll talk more about that in the questions. But there was definitely a big narrative also going on with Michelle Williams going lead instead of supporting, where people expected her to have a better chance of winning, and she kind of had a rocky Precursor run, but ultimately squeaked in here. Ana de Armas in Blonde, a very divisive movie that I was genuinely surprised when the momentum got going for her, to be honest. And then we have Andrea Riseborough, and at the time I was kind of like, is this some sort of like pay it forward scheme happening behind the scenes that I'm not aware of? Because it just seemed to really come out of nowhere, and all these A-listers suddenly started posting about how this is one of the best performances they've ever seen. And now
I feel like you could write a small book, not a big book, but enough of a book to be a book about how Andrea Riseborough got
happened.
nominated for an Oscar.
Yes, absolutely. But with hindsight, I do weirdly enjoy that it happened just for the shock of it all and how much of an anomaly it was and how it made people maybe think a little more about how Oscar campaigning is kind of a pay-to-play system, and it's very hard for these kinds of tiny little indies to really compete with the big studio films with these multi-million-dollar campaigns. So yes, it was a very fun race to track, especially once we got to phase 2, and it felt like a real toss-up between the two heavyweights at the top, and very difficult to predict with confidence which one would win. So yes, I don't think there's any suspense about who the runner-up was, but there may be some in terms of who we would vote for.
Do you remember at the time, like a couple days before the show, who you had your chips on? Because I remember I was in for Michelle Yeoh.
I was in for Michelle Yeoh very tentatively. I was definitely nervous about whether Cate's performance was so undeniable that even with how much people loved Everything Everywhere, that she might lose in the end.
Right.
So more on that later. Shall we get into it?
Yep, let's get started.
Okay. Well, we're starting off with that big one. Cate Blanchett in Tar. So Cate Blanchett gets her 8th Oscar nomination here for Tar, entering a pantheon of an elite group of women here who have scored 8 nominations for acting. The others being Judi Dench, Geraldine Page, Glenn Close, Bette Davis, Katharine Hepburn, and Meryl Streep. Fine company to be in. But it's been a little bit of a break since we last talked about her, which was 2015, her nomination for Carol. Since then, she entered the MCU in Thor Ragnarok. She was one of the stars of Ocean's 8. She got a Golden Globe nomination for her performance in Where'd You Go, Bernadette? She got her first Tony nomination in 2017 for The Present, and her first Emmy nomination for playing Phyllis Schlafly for Mrs. America in 2020. And in 2021, she was in 2 Best Picture nominees, Don't Look Up and Nightmare Alley, receiving a SAG nomination for the latter. So even if the Oscars didn't nominate her during this time, she was still getting plenty of awards attention. And then with Tar here, she is working with Todd Field, whose previous 2 films we covered in the 2000 season, In the Bedroom and Little Children. So this is only his 3rd film, and he wrote it with Cate Blanchett in mind, saying he wouldn't have made it if she didn't sign on. Luckily, she loved it and also became an executive producer, so a very strong, close creative partnership between the two of them. So, of course, Cate did a whole bunch of prep work in order to convincingly play an expert conductor, as she does in the film. She also learned German. She studied. She took piano lessons. She obviously learned technique for conducting. It was a major, major commitment. So, Tar is a psychological drama about a renowned conductor and composer named Lydia Tarr, played by Cate, who has many awards to her name and is celebrated all over the world for her compositions, and she kind of has an inflated ego through the power that she wields. She's living in Germany with her wife and their daughter, but then her life begins to unravel when a former student of hers, whom she blacklisted, comes out of the woodwork with allegations of sexual misconduct, and her carefully constructed world starts to crumble. So there's a whole lot to talk about with this one, but tell me your relationship with Cate Blanchett as an actress and your thoughts on her big sort of Titanic work here in Tar.
Well, I think it goes without saying that Cate Blanchett is like a once in a generation talent. She is one of the goats.
Mm-hmm.
I gotta make the joke I was gonna make.
What?
I'm like, am I watching an episode of Severance here? Because I'm seeing a goat.
Okay.
That's a
Topical.
Severance joke.
Very topical.
That's an incredibly topical, like to the week Severance joke.
Yes. Very good.
The thing that I love about Cate Blanchett is that she's capable of doing anything.
Mm-hmm.
She can do small budget films, she can do big budget films, she can do indies, she can do blockbusters, and she's pretty much great in anything you put her in.
Mm-hmm.
When you put Cate Blanchett in a project, even if the project isn't great, she'll elevate it, even like a little bit.
Yeah.
What are some things I wrote down that I love Cate Blanchett in? Carol, obviously Carol. She's
Mhm.
great in Carol. For last year, for the first time, I saw her in Notes on a Scandal, which is one of the great two-handers.
Yes.
Her win for Blue Jasmine is really good. I think she is one of the best Woody Allen characters, just like full stop. And I like her in the blockbusters like Cinderella and Thor Ragnarok. I
Yes.
think she's the best part of Thor Ragnarok.
Hmm.
Lydia Tarr is probably, I'd say, a top three Cate Blanchett character. What I love about Cate Blanchett in Tar is that she makes such a complicated, it's probably the most complicated character she's ever played. And I think it'll be a really difficult role to top in terms of just how interesting this character is. She's a really fascinating mixture of like the manipulative narcissism, but also like a lot of fear in just like the character.
Hmm.
Like it's the way that she progresses in the film is really interesting. How like she starts off on this really big high as like this EGOT winning egoist who believes that she's above every person that she's around at all times. And watching all of that come apart over the course of the film is, I think, one of the definitely the performance of the decade, or at least one of the performances of the decade.
Hmm.
So I think she's great in the film. I think there's a lot to unpack here to talk about.
Yes, a lot to unpack. Very complicated. I will also just say that I love Tar. Friend of the pod, Louis Vertel, likes to say that there's really no other movie like Tar in terms of the rhythms of it and the sort of style and the genre, even. It's really its own thing. And I definitely agree. I love a good character study and I love a good thorny character, especially a thorny female character. And I think Todd Field feels the same way. And he just writes them and directs them with so much complexity. I think there's a reason he's 3 for 3 in getting his actresses nominated in Best Actress. And I think it's just a match made in heaven working with Cate, who really loves digging into these kinds of flawed people. And she's just such a smart actress in her instincts and in the way that she commands a scene, that this is just the perfect fit for her. And there's really so much technique and skill on display in this performance, particularly in the voice work, and not only the accent, which is obviously American with some European accents to sort of align with how this woman like Lydia Tarr would speak after living in Germany for so long. Plus, she has speaking in German in many scenes, plus being able to convincingly play like an EGOT winning conductor whose passion is her music to the detriment of literally everything else in her life, and also being able to play a person who believes in her own hype. But also, we in the audience can understand that she's kind of just a narcissist and an asshole.
Lydia Tarr is definitely like a bad lady.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a reason
And
that she has her own villain Wikipedia page, as you pointed out to me.
I know, I thought that was so funny that she has an entry on the villain wiki. And
Hmm.
although I don't think Lydia Tarr is like a straight out villain, like a mustache twirling, she's definitely has a lot of issues. What
Yes.
I wrote that I think that's a very mild way to put what's going on with Lydia
Yeah.
Tarr. What I love about this film is that every minute that goes by, you learn more about Tar,
Hmm.
which I think is really, really cool because in a lot of other I don't know if this is like right in the sense that like in a lot of other movies you'll learn a few things about a character, but
And then you kind
they'll
of
they'll
get
go
it.
off screen and then you kind of get it.
Yeah.
But I think because she is on screen for like the majority of the film, we're not breaking to see other characters very often or going off to do other things. That's pretty much the Tar show the whole time. You learn so much more about who she is and what she does, and towards the end why she does what she does and why she doesn't do things.
Hmm.
I really like that you get who this person is on at least a surface level, in that first 20 minutes of the movie, which is that unbroken New Yorker interview.
Yeah.
And I think that right there, even if this was just like a short film and it was just that 20 minutes right there,
Hmm.
that is so impressive because there's so much knowledge in there, and you have to buy that she is playing this character that knows all of this stuff by heart, that has been doing this for however many years. It's like a side tangent, but I remember people talking about it and I want to bring it up. What does Tara win her EGOT for? Because,
Yeah.
yeah, she has an EGOT, which is not an easy thing to get, especially for a composer. It's not like she's a singer-songwriter. She is a composer making music.
Yeah.
I bet you she
Original
did
score
like
for something,
she didn't.
obviously.
You know what? I'm gonna believe that she won original score for scoring a Todd Field movie.
Wow. Layers.
Hmm.
Very meta.
Yep, we're just getting right in there.
Yes, I like that interview scene, especially because, well, first of all, I like before she even gets on stage and she has these very like halting, sort of quick breaths, like she's trying to calm her nerves, but in this very severe, like very German sensibility. Like this is just kind of her process. And just the talk. I just love the very pretentious air about her that's just a smidge too full of herself, like just fully believing in her own hype. And her speech patterns are so theatrical and kind of melodic. The way she says certain like Hebrew words, for example, and then of course like clarifies what she means in English for like in this very condescending way is very funny. Definitely love her line delivery when she says, "Time is the thing. You cannot start without me. I start the clock." Just the very theatrical gestures there is just such a great character building.
And and even in just that sentence there's such a focus on the words I
Yes,
and me,
right. And you can't start
which
without
what
me. Yes.
yes, she is a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
She has never lost. She has scraped her way up from the bottom to be where she is, and as a result, she believes herself to be pretty much infallible.
Right.
As we progress through the movie, we get to the point where she has to get a new cellist for her symphony, and that is the point where stuff really starts to fall apart for her. And I really like the way that all of this progresses because we kind of get a sense the first like 40, 50 minutes of the movie are just her really hyping up her upcoming concert
Yes.
and putting all this stuff together. And then once the new chalice comes in, then stuff starts to get a little you start to get a sense of who she is and how she treats the people around her, like her fellow musicians
Mm-hmm.
and her wife, and the lengths that she's really willing to go to disregard everybody else. I really like some of the scenes that occur when they're in the concert hall with the rest of the symphony, where she brings up the fact that she's gonna have auditions for the soloist. And I really like the look on people's faces and the way that they're like, "Are you sure this is really something that we want to do?" And I love how Lydia Tarr is like, "Well, we're gonna do this because this is what I would like to do, and I'm Lydia Tarr and you're not." So that's kind of why
Yeah.
she finds this new cellist that she is very obviously looking to groom as a new, I don't even know what word I would use to describe it, victim.
Yeah. Sure. That's
And
fair.
all of those interactions are really super interesting. The way that you can tell this is the sort of thing that has happened before in the course of Tar's history as a composer. And this is really the one where it kind of falls apart
Right.
because it doesn't really go the way she thinks it's gonna go.
Yeah. I love the way that she lords over people. We shouldn't, not talk about the big scene where she's at Juilliard, where she's teaching, which is a similar type of dynamic.
Yep.
And
She has a real disregard for young people.
yes, this one student is against the idea of studying Bach because he doesn't think it's relevant to him, as he's a BIPOC pangender person, to be studying these dead white men. And just the look on her face is so great because she takes it as basically a challenge for her to lord her opinions and her experience over the class and talk down to him. And I kind of like the way that that scene is written too, because it sort of feels like a Rorschach test for the audience. I remember there were a lot of people talking about when they saw it in screenings, how they were kind of like on Lydia Tarr's side as she was like talking about separating the art from the artist and all of this stuff. But then there were others who felt more on the side of this student. I appreciate that the film doesn't really teeter one way or the other in terms of giving you exactly what you need to take from it necessarily.
Right. And as you go through the movie, you completely understand why Tar would take the position that she takes
Yes.
in that argument, because of course she would separate the art from the artist because she's aware of the things that she does to people.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, all of this that I do can be excused because I'm the world's greatest composer.
Mm-hmm. And also, don't be so eager to be offended. I just like the gravitas she has and this kind of thunderous power as she is talking about the importance of servicing the composer and dancing the mask. And I just really enjoy the way that she speaks with such almost like a drollness in a way, like she's even a little bit bored to be saying this because she knows these things that she's saying to be true and there's no way of convincing her otherwise. I just think that is pitch perfect of exactly the kind of person that she is, and these people in authority act when their worldview is challenged in any way. And I just think the performance and the direction are so in sync in their vision for this character that her performance weirdly works on multiple layers. I don't know if this is reading too much into it, but she believes so much in her art and we get that from her, but I feel like Cate is also indicating to the audience that she understands that Lydia Tarr is an asshole, and the more she digs in and becomes a bigger and bigger egomaniac, the more we are also like, well, this lady is just full of shit. And Cate kind of knows that, and she as an actress, I think, is reveling in it without indicating too much. So it's very tricky.
I would agree with that. It rides this really fine line because I think as an actor, you kind of have to believe in your character when you're like inhabiting it. But at the same time, Cate Blanchett is fully aware of who Lydia Tarr is. Mm-hmm. And Lydia Tarr is also aware of who Lydia Tarr is. So you can kind of tell as the film goes on, like where you can see where those seams are in her as a person.
Yeah, it's very delicious. And when it comes to the whole thread of Krista, the student who Lydia blacklisted after their relationship went sour, it's fascinating the way she kind of grapples with the idea of this thing that she sort of put out of her mind coming back to haunt her, and how that also converges with her hearing these mysterious noises all around her house and out while she's running, and how she tries to sort of paper over her fears about like the other shoe dropping. But there is also a real fear in her face, which I love seeing because she's so used to being in charge. These are the moments where she's kind of humbled and brought back down to earth. And there is, I think, a little bit of resentment she has for people who she deems as smaller than her. And she likes to call them robots. But there's also a real fear, I think, maybe of their power. And I think it's just sort of like you're saying, on a subconscious level, she knows what she's done. She knows how to wield power so well that she's a little bit scared when others are using their power against her.
I really like all of those nighttime scenes in her like big brutalist house.
Yes.
And we get those nightmare sequences. I mean, like this is great for Cate Blanchett, but also just the way Todd Field directed this movie. Like one of the shots that I really love and I like to like just think about just to unpack what that even means is that shot of her nightmare that she's having where she's like on the bed in the swamp.
Yeah.
And she's like catching on fire. I'm like, there is so much to unpack there. And that happens at this point in the movie where she's starting to get some inklings that people are aware of what went on with Krista.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing in this movie the point in her life where she is in a constant state of overwhelming paranoia.
Yeah.
And it's depicted really well. And I think she does this great really balance of being both at like this really big peak, but also at like the lowest level she's ever been in.
Hmm.
And it's a lot of really great face acting that Cate Blanchett has always been good at.
Yeah.
But I think about the scene a little bit towards the end of the film where she is returning that bear that the cellist dropped, and
Hmm.
she's walking through Berlin, this weird part of Berlin where it's like these underground tunnels that are filled with water. You have no idea like where she is, if she like dropped into a different dimension or something. And she's hearing noises everywhere and she's running. And it's just this is a side of Lydia Tarr that no one will ever see
Yeah.
up to that point in the movie.
Right.
And I think she just plays that really well. And it feels, despite the fact that it is the same character, it feels like a completely different person than who we saw like an hour ago.
Oh, yes. And I just really like the way she plays that gradual loss of control, and how she doesn't even know that she can't really stop what's coming until it's too late. She still is assuming that she can sort of stop the boulder from running down the hill, because it doesn't quite look like a boulder to her just yet. I do think when she walks up the steps during that sequence and trips and breaks her nose, that's when it's like, okay, well, there's no way this is going to get any better for her. This is,
Yep. She is at that point I'm like, "Oh, she's cooked."
yeah.
And I think the other people in the conservatory
Hmm.
learn about what's been going on with her and the misconduct that she's done. And that leads to, I think, a scene that when I saw, I swore was a dream sequence.
Oh,
But it is, of course, the period where the concert is starting that she was supposed to be involved in,
mm-hmm.
and you see her run out from backstage and tackle the composer that is starting the piece. And I
Yes.
was like, "Oh, this can't really be happening."
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm like, "Oh no,
Yeah,
this is the reality of
that
the
is
film."
what happened. Yes. I also just really like the look on her face when she's about to go on stage, when she's been banned from this whole thing, and she's kind of snuck her way in, and she's like hiding in the bathroom stall at one point, and she's about to go there and ambush. I think that is some of her best face acting, especially when she starts to hear the score, and it just fills her with so much rage and also sadness too, and disappointment, which I think she has notes of that really blended together really well. And yeah,
Hmm.
goes out and punches him, and just the way that she screams, "This is my score," is actually genuinely frightening. I think I've
Yeah,
never quite seen her
and
do anything like that.
but it echoes the beginning of the film
Mm,
where she says, "I'm the one that keeps time,
yes.
and people don't start without me."
Hmm.
She is, I mean, like, there's a lot of characters in Oscar history. You've watched many, many of them, but
Hundreds.
there are few narcissists as big as Lydia Tarr.
Yes. Sometimes I think about what some of our favorite old Hollywood actresses would think of a character like this, and be able to, or like want to play a character like this, but their time, they couldn't do it in that time, like Katharine Hepburn or Betty Davis or Olivia de
Mm,
Havilland, these women who really just wanted to tear into these kinds of roles.
yep.
So yeah, but I also really like this one little moment of vulnerability too that we get when she returns to her childhood home and she watches her old Leonard Bernstein tapes, and he's speaking so beautifully about the power of music and all this stuff, and it causes her to break down in tears. And I think just the emptiness she feels there and the despair at where her life has gone, you shouldn't feel sympathy for her, and for the most part I don't, but there's also such sincerity from her in that moment, and a real honesty for the first time perhaps, and you're maybe seeing the real her before all the bluster and the Lydia Tarr of it all and the accolades and everything went to her head. And I think it's a credit to her that she can reveal that layer that is so different from what we've seen before, and still make it seem like the same person, you know?
I love that you learn that her name is Linda Tarr. I
Right.
love that she lives in Staten Island,
Mm-hmm.
that she grew up in Staten Island, and when she talks with her brother, you can hear the Staten Island accent.
Yeah.
And
Right.
I love that moment because I think what that shows there is that she has a genuine love for music, but she had to create this Lydia Tarr character in order to really rise above other people in order to claim that number one spot. And I think in the course of getting to the top there and reaching that peak, she just got corrupted so much by being up there. Potentially. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's we learn that she has this genuine love for music, but it's interesting to kind of figure out if who Lydia Tarr is was something that was created or if it's something that was always kind of in her, you know?
Yes. Well, I think the system being what it is only exacerbated those traits that she maybe always had.
Hmm.
And I think being part of this predominantly male dominated field maybe made her adapt in a way to take on some of those more traditionally like alpha traits, perhaps.
And I just want to really quick talk about the very ending of this movie
Mm-hmm.
where she's in the Philippines.
Yes, she's disgraced now.
Yep, she's disgraced. She's been kicked out of the industry and she's reduced to doing video game conventions in the Philippines.
Yeah. What was your take on
And
that ending when you first saw
I was so excited because I'm like, oh man, she's going to Comic-Con and not having a good time. She's gotta go on the click track and play the score exactly as it
it?
is
Mm-hmm.
because she is no longer the one that gets to keep time here.
Right.
She's just a hired hand.
Mm-hmm.
And for someone who was very recently one of the biggest deals in the music world to be really just like not recognized in any way
Mm-hmm.
is such a come down for her. But I think it's kind of where she needs to be
Yes.
after everything she's put everybody through.
Correct. And I just think Kate really registers the humiliation throughout that whole Philippine sequence quite beautifully in a very like darkly humorous way, but also in a way that it's like you almost feel a little bit bad for her that this happened.
And I think if in a different film made by somebody else, this movie ends with maybe Tar goes to jail, or maybe Tar has to like move to the Midwest, or maybe Tar commits suicide and jumps off a building or something like
Jesus.
that, in order to give Tar like a flat ending.
Sure.
But I think this is the worst possible ending in Lydia Tarr's mind of
Yeah.
what could happen to her. Because it's not like she can close out her career and be like, oh, she was disgraced, but she had all of this great work and then that was it for her. No, she has to continue living with the knowledge of who she was,
Mm-hmm.
but no longer is anymore. And it's that lack of importance that really kills her the most.
Yeah. It is brilliant work. There are many moments that can be touched on, of course, that we didn't even mention, like the whole scene of her going to the school and yelling at a child and saying that she's Petra's father, an iconic moment.
Hmm.
And of course, her dealing with her neighbor who is trying to sell their home because the mother died. And I just love the scene where they go to her and they're like, "Oh, we heard the music," and she's like, "Oh, yes, of course, thank you." But they're like, "No, we don't want that to be happening because we're trying to sell
Yeah.
this house." And then
Can
of
you can
course,
you let us know when the music's gonna be so we know when to not have people
right,
here?
right, and of course she takes that well by taking out her accordion and singing "Apartment for Sale."
The new hot single
Yes.
of the fall season.
Just the way she kind of grunts through that song, I think, is so classic Kate in the best way.
Yeah. This is an S tier performance. This is just like a 5-star chef's kiss masterpiece.
No notes. Yeah.
No notes, all great.
Yes. Okay. Shall we move on to our next nominee?
Yes.
Yes, quite a transition here. Okay, Ana de Armas in Blonde. So, Ana de Armas gets her first Oscar nomination here for Blonde, and she is the first Cuban actress to do so in Best Actress. She was born in Havana, and she became interested in acting when she was 12, and she eventually was accepted to the National Theater of Cuba, and then she made her film debut in Virgin Rose in 2006. She moved to Madrid shortly after and became a working actress in Spain through the mid 2010s and starred on a popular teen soap called El Internado. So she made the transition to Hollywood in 2014, where she took a crash course in English and learned a lot of her first few Hollywood roles phonetically for films like Knock Knock, War Dogs, and Hands of Stone. Then in 2017, she had a key role in Blade Runner 2049 as the big holographic girlfriend of Ryan Gosling in that movie. I think that's where a lot of people first took notice of her. And then her first true leading lady breakthrough role came in 2019 with a starring role in Knives Out. And she emerged as one of the highlights of a cast full of much bigger stars than her at the time, and she landed her first Golden Globe nomination. And then from there, she would appear more frequently in films to varying degrees of success, like The Night Clerk and Wasp Network, a lot of wife-girlfriend type roles. And she had a short but very memorable role in No Time to Die as well. But then in 2022, that's pretty much her big year for her, where she co-stars with Ben Affleck in Deep Water. She reunites with Ryan Gosling for The Gray Man, and she has her biggest challenge to date as an actress with Blonde. So Blonde is an adaptation of the Joyce Carol Oates novel of the same name, emphasis on novel, because this is a fictionalized version of Marilyn Monroe's life. So yes, we have another Marilyn Monroe quasi-biopic 11 years after My Week with Marilyn, which we talked about for 2011. This is an imagining of what Marilyn went through in her life, taking some of the major players around her like Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller and various executives and sort of creating a narrative using those pieces without too much fidelity to the facts. That's what Joyce Carol Oates' book is, and that's basically what Andrew Dominik's adaptation is as well, although he does claim that his version is closer to the truth. But this had been in the works since the early 2010s and went through various delays. Naomi Watts was going to play Marilyn at first, then she was replaced by Jessica Chastain. And by the time we got to late 2010s, Andrew Dominik had seen Anna in Knock Knock and really liked her, and she auditioned and got the part. So she went through extensive vocal training to try and mask her accent and committed very strongly to the part. So the film goes through Marilyn's life, essentially from cradle to grave, as she grows up Norma Jean Mortensen with a mentally ill mother. She eventually finds her way into Hollywood through her pinup work and magazines and changes her name to Marilyn Monroe. And she breaks into the movies after an executive has his way with her. And she gets into various relationships with men who are essentially stand-ins for Joe DiMaggio and Arthur Miller. We also have Charlie Chaplin Jr. and Edward G. Robinson Jr., who she had a kind of polyamorous relationship with, the film suggests at least. But she begins to resent her fame and struggles with her identity, dealing with a great deal of traumatic events, including desiring a baby, but never being able to have one. So here we go. I will just say I had been dreading this rewatch ever since she got nominated 2 years ago, but this was your first time watching this. Tell me your relationship with Ana de Armas as an actress and your thoughts on her performance as Marilyn Monroe.
All right. Ana de Armas, I'm generally positive on.
Okay.
I feel like she's never really been able, despite being in a bunch of things, she's never really been able to like break into that movie star echelon that I feel like her contemporaries have been able to. I feel like she's contemporaries with like Emma Stone and Margot Robbie, maybe a little bit younger than them,
Florence
but generally
Pugh.
like in Florence Pugh,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely like contemporary, and she just can't really break into that movie star period.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's great in Knives Out. She's great in Blade Runner 2049, and for me, that's kind of the end of it.
Okay.
She,
What
she,
about No
she,
Time to Die?
She is wonderful in like her 20 minutes of No Time to Die.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, like three movies and then a bunch of stuff that doesn't exist,
Sure.
especially the Gray Man, which is of course one of the most popular movies of the 2020s. Everyone has seen the Gray Man and everybody loves it.
Okay.
According to Netflix, everyone has seen it, everybody loves it. It's the Gray Man. Get ready for four more Gray Men.
Wow.
Um,
Okay, go off.
Blonde is a bad movie. It is you go on Letterboxd and I was like, let me just see what people think of this movie and I'm like 1 star, 1 star, 2 stars, 1 stars, 5 stars and then like several more 1 or 2 stars. So I'm like, I don't know, this might not be a great movie and I wasn't prepared for like how bad the movie is.
Mm.
I'm gonna use some fairly salty language here. I
Mm.
hope you're ready.
Okay.
When I was done watching this movie, I thought to myself, this movie is dog shit. This is
Oh no.
awful. Here's what I wrote down in my notes about
Okay.
Blonde. I wrote down there is all caps underscored a lot going on in Blonde, and the movie asks a lot of Anna de Armas, so it's rough that the directing and writing are actively bad.
Mm-hmm.
Movie makes no attempts to hide its disdain for its lead character, putting Marilyn Monroe
Yeah.
and Anna de Armas through one awful scenario after another, very much hitting the same note over and over for count 'em 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Did this movie need to be 2 hours? I think you can cut 45 minutes from this film.
Yeah. I think you can cut the sequences of her unborn child, perhaps.
Yeah, I think you can cut that sequence where like her unborn child speaks to her through the void and it's like, "Hey, I'm your weird baby and you don't love me."
Yeah, yeah.
There's and
Not far off.
hey, if you let me tell you, if you like seeing women assaulted, you'll love
Oh my
Blonde because
God.
it happens every 20 minutes.
Yes. It's
And
rough.
this is a thing that I noted the most throughout the course of watching this film that I think I haven't read the novel, but if it has the same like perspective as Andrew Dominic, this movie hates Marilyn Monroe. It thinks that she's dumb,
Mm.
easily manipulated, addicted to all sorts of stuff even before things get worse for her.
Mm-hmm.
She just makes bad decision after bad decision and has zero respect for her as a person and as an artist.
Yeah.
It's just really, really a hard watch. And I can imagine somebody reading this script and being like, this is a really like juicy role that I can really bite into. People want to play Marilyn Monroe for reasons we can kind of get into in a little bit. But this just really did not work for me at all. And I wish that the performance was better, but I don't think Anna de Armas is a good enough actress to overcome how bad the movie she is in
Mm.
is.
Wow. Yeah. Well, first of all, my first brush with Anna de Armas was her role in Blade Runner 2049, which I was very captivated by, even from the first trailer that came out with her in the blue wig and everything, just a very striking image. But then to see her really emerge as this great sort of charismatic force in Knives Out, that was really cool. When I found out she was going to play Marilyn Monroe, I was like, okay, interesting casting. Not totally sold on whether she can pull that off. And then when I heard the reports about the very divisive quality of the film, was very nervous, even though she, I think, had pretty positive reviews on the whole, at least. And unfortunately, I did go into this with some preconceived notions just based on what other critics had to say about it. And as someone who's appreciative of old Hollywood and actresses in particular, I feel like it had some strikes against it just from what people were saying about it being exploitative and misery porn and a complete misinterpretation of Marilyn's life. So, having said that, I think it totally lives up to all of those things.
Great, perfect.
I think when I watched it, I thought the visuals were quite striking. You know, the cinematography, the way that it sort of is trying to recreate these old photographs from her life. I sort of can understand that, even though the different aspect ratios are kind of nonsensical to me. At least
The directing in this movie is like incomprehensible.
yeah,
Why things happen the way they happen.
yeah. But I think the score is pretty good, but on a storytelling level, I just had the most miserable time with it, and I felt the same on this rewatch. I do find it to be very distasteful and salacious and deliberately trying to provoke the audience in a way that I find actually kind of eye-rolling, to be honest. I think this is a film that wants to deliver a sort of empathetic view of Marilyn and everything she went through, and how, of course, beneath the glamour, her life was hell. And I mean, I'm not saying it wasn't, but I also don't think it was like this avalanche of unending misery as it's depicted in this film. It feels to me like the film is only really interested in Marilyn as a victim rather than as a person who had some highs in real life, believe it or not, in addition to all of the lows that we see in the film. She started her own production company. She won a Golden Globe. She actually liked her work, despite the fact that every time she watches herself in this film, she seems disgusted by it. So it's hard for me to get past all of that because it feels like the film is just as guilty of exploiting her as it wants to depict Hollywood as exploiting her.
This is the thing that really like grinds my gears about this film is that when it gets to the point where Marilyn's a big success and is doing all of these movies that we know and love her from, basically what the story depicts is that while she was making these movies, she was miserable, she was having a terrible time, and she also didn't like making these movies.
Mm-hmm.
All of these movies were like made under duress. She was in like a psychotic state every time she would make these films. And the way that sequence where the Some Like It Hot sequence where she's at the premiere and it like glosses over like the film itself and like this like the weird editing directing style
Yeah.
there almost like makes me feel like the movie is telling you should feel bad for liking her movies, which is like such a weird and like kind of awful take on Marilyn Monroe as an actress,
Well, didn't Andrew
you know?
Dominic even say certain things during the whole press tour about how her movies aren't really like great or something? I don't know. Something about that.
I definitely remember things of that nature, and
Yeah.
I'm just like, I don't think you're the best person to be
No.
doing a Marilyn Monroe biopic.
Yes.
And it's like, listen, I know this is one of the most famous people in Hollywood, but let's just be honest. I think her films are bad, and I think
Right.
it was a bad person, and she was a victim her entire life. It's
Yeah.
like, that's not the movie that I want to see. And I understand
And
that,
it's not
like,
even what happened
it's,
either.
yeah, that's the thing, is that, like, it's just not something that I enjoyed or even, like, appreciated. Especially because this is another note, is that, like, another note that I wrote down is that this film kind of reminded me a lot of Requiem for a Dream
Mm.
when I was watching it,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a very similar film of like, oh, these are people going through difficult circumstances with addiction and things like that. But the thing about Requiem for a Dream is that you have a lot of characters going through different circumstances.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same tenor throughout all of them, but at least you're getting different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
But it's kind of like if the all of the sequences and Requiem for a Dream were all happening to one person.
Yeah.
And if you do that for 2 hours and 45 minutes, by the time you hit the 2 hour mark, you feel kind of numb and almost bored,
Mm-hmm. Which you shouldn't
know,
feel with
which you
what she went
shouldn't
through.
feel about
Yeah.
this film.
No.
Yeah.
I think stories like this just need a more sensitive touch. This is a film that people have compared to Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, which is also about a sort of hellish life of a young, attractive, blonde woman. But I mean, there, I think David Lynch has a lot of empathy for Laura Palmer and treats her
Yep.
life with respect and dignity, even amid all the misery. And I just
That's
don't,
the difference.
yeah, I just don't think the film captures any of that same respect. So even while it is hard for me to get past a lot of what the film is, I think Ana de Armas is doing pretty good work here. I don't think it's outstanding. I do think she does strike a great image of Marilyn, like even in like that 7-year Itch shot that we get with the white dress and the smile and the head turn. It is very accurate in that way, and there's a kind of effervescence there that she captures whenever she's allowed to do that, which is not often.
Yeah.
I think the look is very on point. Her voice work is interesting because she does try to do that breathy tone that Marilyn had, and the fragility as well. I think it takes a little bit of adjusting to the accent, unfortunately. And I know she did her best with it, but if you know Marilyn well, or know her screen persona at least, it is a little difficult to get past at times. I don't know if that was how you felt too.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. It does, like, the visuals are there
Hmm.
for sure, but it does sometimes when you're outside of those particular sequences, it does just sometimes feel a little bit like cosplay.
Hmm.
So it's tough. And I think this is the thing that Baby Clyde brought up when you were talking about My Week with Marilyn, is that it's very, very, very difficult to do Marilyn Monroe because she had that quality that is kind of, you can't copy it. You can't really replicate it
Yeah.
because it was a one in a million sort of thing. So when people are playing Marilyn Monroe, you automatically have to compare it to the real thing. And then as a result, if you're not, you're either matching it up or you're not. And I think she almost gets there. But in my personal opinion, I think I like Michelle Williams a little bit more. Even if the visuals don't match up as much,
Hmm.
I think the spirit that she has there is a little bit better.
Yeah.
And I think it also there when we're talking about those two films, I think the difference and the reason why I like My Week with Marilyn more than I like Blonde is because that movie has empathy and respect for Marilyn Monroe as a person. At
Yeah.
least certainly more than this film.
Yeah. It allows some balance for her to have those good moments, That's nice. Well, one of the things I wrote in my notes in terms of Anna's performance is that I really like how she communicates that underneath everything is ultimately a very scared little girl who had to grow up too fast. And her interactions with men, especially, are always so fraught with tension and uneasiness. And I think she does a good job of that with trying to sort of keep from crying or screaming in those moments, and just that
Yep.
tension there of not being able to fully express herself and how that shows on her face.
Hmm.
But I think kind of as the film goes on, I sort of feel like it's a lot of the same notes ultimately. So the effect of that tends to wear off a bit, and you kind of want more range there. But the problem is the script that she's working with, which doesn't really allow for that range. So, like, I found myself more impressed with her at the beginning, but I don't know if that is just because I hadn't been inundated with the same kind of scene over and over again by the end,
Yeah.
if that makes
I
sense.
think that's no, I think that definitely makes sense. I think that's the case here, where when you transition from child Norma Jean to Anna de Armas as Marilyn Monroe, the performance does start out good, but it is very much the sort of thing of like this character isn't really allowed to grow over the course of this film
Hmm.
because of the direction, because of the script, and as a result, the by the time you hit the end of the film, the last 15 minutes of which are just horrible. Just
Yeah.
just the worst. Just like let's just have the worst possible things happening to Marilyn Monroe. By that point, I think you're supposed to be really like shocked and appalled by these things that are happening, but it kind of feels at that point like Anna de Armas is overshadowed by whatever bad things are happening. It
Yes.
becomes less about her as a character and more about her as like a plot device.
Yes. And it is a disservice to her, I think, ultimately.
Yeah, both to the character and to the actress.
Yeah. And I think even in certain scenes, like when she's in the theater watching herself in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she kind of has this sort of uneasy look on her face as she's watching it. And then she just literally says, "That thing up on the screen isn't me." I just feel like it doesn't really even trust Anna to deliver on whatever conflicting emotion she's having about her career, just showing it to us without literally just spelling it out for us in certain moments. So
Yeah.
that bothers me.
I wish that she had a better project here, but I suppose I'm glad that she got a nomination, but I wish that it was for a better movie.
Yeah,
I
that's the
don't
thing.
know.
I mean,
Yeah.
again, after a certain point, I do sadly just start to check out because of just how unrelenting the misery is, and it's so thudding and obvious. It is harrowing, obviously, and I sort of get the idea behind it in terms of I feel like it's trying to get you to feel the same level of torture and torment that she may have felt during all this. And just the whole whirlwind of being a star, but never really being taken seriously, and being in all these horrible relationships and taking drugs and starting to hallucinate. I sort of get that, like, psychologically what it's trying to go for, but it does get to a point where it doesn't just feel exploitative because Marilyn is being exploited. It's that the film itself feels that way too, and like it is trying to provoke the audience without even really giving us anything super substantial to think about. And
Yeah,
there are
there's
these
not a
moments
lot to
of,
really like chew on here.
right, like, for example, why do we need a scene of her baby talking to her about, like, not wanting to be aborted? Or why do we need an extreme close-up shot of her in bed with JFK giving him a blowjob? Why do we have these
Yeah.
things?
Why? And we have this like the bizarre sequence of like the G-Men like in night vision in her house as she's wandering around like naked and bloody. I'm like I feel like all of this is just for shock value. There's
Yeah.
no real like empathy or like point here except to say, look at what we're doing to Marilyn Monroe. You've never seen her like this before. And I'm like, I think there's a reason why. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's, I just really wish that I could say more about the performance. She has moments. I mean, I did want to point out in that Some Like It Hot scene, the way that she kind of recreates that I Want to Be Loved by You performance, I do find pretty uncanny. So there are these little moments where I'm just like, she really does channel Marilyn, but I find that it's just so, few and far between that sadly I just don't feel much of anything by the end of this when I very much should. I should be feeling totally wrecked in a good way, just on a foundational level, going through what she went through in the same way that I feel when I watch Fire Walk with Me. But with this, I just feel like, to what end?
It's an exhausting film, but not in like an emotionally cathartic way.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I hope whatever Anna does next will be better than this in terms of if she ever gets into this awards discussion again, which I'm hopeful for. She does have a charisma to her that I think she still can.
Yeah, that's the thing about her is that I think she has a lot of capability to do good work. I think the performance that she gives in Knives Out is certainly
Mm-hmm.
proof positive of that. I just need her to be in better projects. That's all.
Yes, indeed. Okay. Well, shall we move on to our next nominee? Big one.
Yep.
Andrea Riseborough into Leslie.
Oh boy, we're here at Leslie.
Oh lordy, yes. It is time to get to one of the most notorious Best Actress nominations in history. Andrea Riseborough to Leslie. I feel like just saying that combination of words is enough to like provoke a reaction out of people listening.
It's like
One way or
lightning
another.
has crashed
Yes.
somewhere.
Yes. And they're suddenly, it's like this moment of Vietnam nightmare being like, I remember where I was on nomination morning. Anyway.
I remember where I was on nomination morning.
There you go. Well, Andrea was born in Newcastle upon Tyne in England. She studied acting at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, and from there she had a lengthy career mostly as a character actress, with a handful of leading roles. She was in Happy Go Lucky, Made in Dagenham, Never Let Me Go. She played Margaret Thatcher in a TV movie. She had a key role in the Madonna movie, W.E., and she got some recognition in Britain for her performances in films like Brighton Rock and Shadow Dancer. And then she gets a bunch of awards as part of the cast of Birdman, playing Michael Keaton's girlfriend in that. People may or may not remember that, but that did happen. She continued to pop up in films like Nocturnal Animals and Battle of the Sexes, The Death of Stalin. She's on a season of Bloodline. She had a role in a Black Mirror episode, doing all kinds of things, movies and TV. Then in the late 2010s, she started to take on more leading roles in films like Nancy and Mandy and Possessor, which got her a lot of positive notices. And then came 2022, where she's also in Amsterdam and Matilda the Musical. But most importantly, we have To Leslie, which is a super low budget independent drama made for less than $1 million. So To Leslie is about a woman named Leslie, played by Andrea, who lives in West Texas, and she wins the lottery one day, winning close to $200,000. But she completely squanders the money on liquor and drugs, and 6 years later, we see how she's living a difficult life. She's struggling with alcoholism and going from place to place. She has a troubled relationship with her young adult son, who she tries to stay with, but she proves unreliable, and she stays with friends, but they kick her out too. She eventually finds some hope again with a local motel owner, played by Mark Maron, who offers her a job as a cleaner and helps her get sober and get her act together, although she continues to battle her demons throughout. So let's get right into it. Andrea Riseborough, thoughts on Andrea overall as an actress? Also curious what you thought when she did get that surprise nomination, which we'll definitely talk more about later. But yeah, what do you think of this performance?
All right, well, my relationship with Andrea Riseborough begins with To Leslie.
Wow. Okay. Jeez.
I mean, I'm aware that she's somebody that's been around.
Yes.
I was vaguely aware that she was like eighth build in Birdman, but she's a character actor. And I remember this whole season, people, actresses, famous people in big movies that certainly bigger movies than she's ever been in, bigger roles than she's ever gotten before, posting, you have to see To Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little film with a big heart. This is one of the best performances I've seen in decades.
Yeah.
And you have to see this movie. And I was like, oh, this is like a bit, right? like there's movies like To Leslie that come out all the time. Nobody sees them. They go straight to streaming or they're at film festivals. And somehow this one breaks through and people are like, you gotta watch it. And I'm like, okay, but it's not really like gonna get nominated. And then when it shows up on nomination morning, I remember people were flipping out because not only was this not expected at all, but it very famously pushed out other nominations that people really were expecting.
Mm-hmm.
So I know this film starts with a lot of baggage before even like starting the film. 3 years removed from all of that. Watching To Leslie, I have to say that the film is perfectly fine. I don't see what made people in the industry say this is one of the best performances of the year. I don't think it's a bad performance. I think Andrea Riseborough really carries the movie. She's on screen the whole time. She has a perfectly suitable, by-the-numbers character arc of someone that starts low and meets people that want to help her out. She tries to get sober. She fails. She tries to get sober again. She meets Mark Maron, which in my opinion is very exciting.
Yes.
Because I'm a longtime listener of his podcast. And I gotta say that by the end of the film, I'm really touched by the journey that she's been on. But it's just not enough for me to really justify the nomination.
Okay. So I think I am much more positive on this than you are. I generally like Andrea Riseborough. I can't say I'm like a fan, quote unquote, necessarily, but I do really find her to be one of the true best chameleons we have on screen working today. Like, if I were to look at all of her roles and her appearances in her films through the years, she's just like a shapeshifter. I think the first time I saw her was in Never Let Me Go. But yeah, she's just a very versatile actress in a way that more actors should be, I think, because I love stars, and when people lend their star personas to things, it's obviously very exciting. But I think being able to really just fully become other people like she can is kind of scary at times, but also a gift. And I think what she does here in To Leslie, like if I had no idea who Andrea Riseborough was, I don't think I ever would have guessed that she was a British actress, certainly. She seems like someone who could have grown up acting with people like Margot Martindale or Dale Dickey, for all I knew, or like other character actresses that just read as authentically Southern, to me at least.
She's the reverse Renee Zellweger.
Oh, okay. Meaning what?
Because in the sense that like, oh, Renee Zellweger is British
Oh,
and
okay.
Bridget Jones, you
Mhm.
would never guess that
That she's a Texas
from,
girl. Yeah,
yeah.
I know. That's true. But yes, I think the film does have a lot of predictable beats. If you've seen a lot of independent films like this that are about lower middle class people struggling from paycheck to paycheck and dealing with certain things like alcoholism, you can kind of predict how things are going to go. So I don't think the film is really worth writing home about, but I do think her performance is really good. I would go so far as to say I think it's great, actually. Um,
Well,
yes, I love how uninhibited she is, and even the way she like weirdly contorts her face at times, I think is very raw and very unvarnished. I think you can really sense from her like this sense of fear beneath all of that bravado and her posturing and everything when she's out and about, even when she's going out to the bar and getting drinks and everything. I feel like there is a real sadness there and a loneliness. I think some people may say that this is very over the top, and while it is certainly a loud character, I do think she fills in a lot of detail here to show her flaws, but also her kind of good time gal sort of charm. And I would also just say that there are people in the world who are like this, and it may seem like a lot and very, over the top and theatrical, but that is how certain people can be. And I think she captures this type of person very well.
I really get a sense of the Leslie character in that first like half hour of the movie,
Yeah.
which I think is a little bit repetitive in the sense that it's a lot of scenes of her being around people that have tried to help her and her repeatedly fucking up the circumstances that she's in, whether it's with her son or with her old friends Alice and Janney and Stephen Root back in Texas. Like those scenes get a little bit repetitive.
Yeah.
And for me personally, I think the movie kicks up a little bit when they get to the motel and when she's with Andrea Riseborough and Mark Maron.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that she and Mark Maron have really good chemistry. And the thing that is like so exciting about that is that, as you said, she's been a character actor for like 20 years at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And Mark Maron, while has mostly just been playing himself for the most part, he's only been acting at this point for like 4 or 5 years. So I think it is really exciting to see them working so well together. And what I like about those scenes is that it's just really refreshing and heartening to see Leslie be around somebody that doesn't immediately hate her.
Yeah.
It's a breath of fresh air. And I like this point where we start to roll back uphill with Leslie and her recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And it's at this point that I really like start to root for her, which is something that I didn't expect to do at the start of the film. But
Yeah.
and it's the pretty basic script, but I'm still kind of wrapped into it because of the level of the performance, which I think is again better than the movie itself.
Yeah. I think both her and Mark Maron very much elevate this script. Well, I think to the point of the repetitiveness, I just think that is what happens when there are people who have this kind of addiction and they kind of run into the same problem over and over again with people. And sometimes, in certain cases, don't always have the benefit of sort of self-analysis, I suppose. And I just think also the way that she plays drunk is very convincing. I think her face is very animated in these moments. Like, even just stuff she's doing with, like, her mouth and her tongue is just, like, very sloppy and very much like, I don't care what anyone thinks, and it's a lot of energy she brings to it. Again, I don't really see it as hammy.
Yeah, I don't think it's a hammy performance.
Yeah.
But I think it's a realistic performance.
Yeah. And you almost get, like, a secondhand embarrassment at times as she's trying to for example, provoke this one guy at the bar, and she's like trying to flirt with him who's visiting from out of town, and he doesn't really know her like other people in town know her, and she kind of hangs on to him very desperately because she just wants that connection. I just made a note of that scene because I love the way the camera kind of lingers on her and her face as the guy makes it clear that he wants absolutely nothing to do with her after their dance, which I find pretty heartbreaking, but it's also not surprising to her because that's just how most people interact with her nowadays, is that they see her, they talk with her, and then they just want nothing to do with her. I think you feel the sort of loneliness of that over time with her.
Yeah.
Well, there's also another great scene of her at a bar when there are very few people around, and there's this Willie Nelson song playing at the time, and she's just sitting there, drink in front of her, cigarette in hand, and she just looks completely run down and just so empty, like she truly has nothing going for her. And it's this quiet little moment of reflection that I think she really, really nails, and it leads her to her old house, and it's very horribly awkward scene of her.
That scene is a real, I think that's the heartbreaker of the movie, for real.
Yes, of her just kind of reminiscing in front of these people who own the house now about how this house used to be so great and everything.
She points to where the Christmas tree used to be, and she asks these people, she does not know if this is where they put their Christmas tree. And it's just, it's such a rough moment. But again, it feels like a real person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there are moments like that. And this is going to be a big comparison. I'm not comparing this movie to this director's movies, but a little bit of a John Cassavetes type of vibe when we get to these moments of just sort of lingering on someone who is completely self-destructing. That is very reminiscent of stuff that Jenna Rollins would do in his films. So I think Andrea would have been a great John Cassavetes character actor.
Do you think that's part of the reason why actors were so on board with this movie?
Yes.
Because this is a real raw, stripped down performance that a lot of bigger actors don't really get the chance to do.
I think so.
Because this is a movie that was made for very little money.
Mm-hmm.
And just by virtue of having a big star on that film, you already, if they're not willing to get paid scale, you're already inflating that budget past the point where they could really afford to make a movie like this.
Yeah.
So they see this movie that feels like a real actor's movie.
Right.
And they really go for it. There are other movies like this one that come out, but this is the one that got their attention.
Yeah. Because I also think this is more accessible, even within that rawness. I don't want to sound condescending with it, but it's just like, it is rawness in a very pretty package, I suppose.
Yeah.
That is very appealing to actors. So it's not like that uncomfortable that you just want to turn it off, Right.
It's similar to a Cassavetes-esque performance, but it's not quite at that level.
Right.
But it's close enough that actors are like, this is really something I haven't seen in a long time. But but it's also maybe because maybe you're not watching that many movies.
Actors don't watch a lot of movies. They're busy acting.
Fair enough. That's true.
Yes.
I want to talk about my personal favorite scene in the film, which is like right around the end of the film where she's at the bar and meets Friday Night Lights' Matt Lauria.
Yeah.
And she's just about on her way to getting sober. And she meets this guy, and the interaction that she has with him is completely different from the interactions that you had mentioned from the bars earlier in the film.
Right.
And she knows now at this point in the film that the problems aren't other people. The problems are her. And I love that scene where she looks at this guy that she doesn't know, and she's like, tell me that I'm not a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And
tell me I'm good.
It's that's for me, that's the scene where I'm like, this is really something that's really clicking for me right here.
Yeah.
because it's a full realization of this character, and it's this character's realization of who she is and what she wants to be, which is like really compelling and really interesting.
Yeah.
I just think it comes right at the end of the movie for me, but it's right where for me it needs to come in because by the time we hit the end of the movie, appreciate what she's doing.
Yeah. Yeah. She is allowed to have an arc, unlike the last performance we just talked about.
Yep. Yep.
But
I think
yes.
that's why I would put this performance over that performance.
Yeah. Just by nature of the structure, I suppose. That is just
Yeah.
how it goes. But yes, I love that scene too. And that is a very impactful moment because I feel like this is after she's kind of had this a little bit of tension with the Mark Maron character. They've kind of had this argument, and then she kind of is realizing, I think, in that moment, she probably screwed up with him, and she just wants anyone to show her kindness. And that is what brings her back to the motel. And then in the end, we're flashing forward to nearly a year later, and she's fulfilling her dream that she's talked about a little bit about fixing up the old ice cream shop and making it into a diner like she's always dreamed of. And the opening day is a disaster because no one showed up. And then here comes Alice and Janney at the end, showing up at the end, and Leslie is realizing what she did, which is to basically poison the well and just convince everyone in town to not show up. Apparently she has a lot of influence in town, Alice and Janney. And they have this confrontation, but then it leads to this revelation that, you know, she's also brought along Leslie's son, who has had a very rocky relationship with throughout the movie, and they reconcile. And I think just the relief there that washes over her face, I think is really beautiful work.
And like, I definitely feel like I'm a sucker here because I fall into this scene like so easily. I know exactly what's going to happen and I
Yes.
know exactly the beats, but it works for me really well.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think the cliches land for me. And I remember when we were watching the movie The Sick, I was surprised myself by how emotional I was about the end of this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not anything revelatory, but I think I like the ending of the film, and I wish we got more of her working at the diner and having a good time.
Well, maybe that's for two Leslie.
To Leslie.
Two.
To
Leslie
Leslie
two.
two. To Leslie two.
Wow.
There should be 4 more To Leslie movies.
4 more. Wow. Okay.
Yep. To Leslie, To Leslie two, 3 Leslie,
3 Leslie.
and then
2 Leslie origins.
And then FOR Leslie.
4 Leslie. Wow. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. I love that.
That's the grand finale.
Leslie goes forth. Yes.
Yep.
Well, there you go. I think it is truly a small movie with a big heart. So, and I think that is why people resonated with it, is that it just is very sincerely performed. I think that is maybe what you're taking from it as well, is that everyone involved here seems to just really be taking this with sincerity.
Yeah, this isn't a cash grab. They didn't
Right.
make any money off of this movie. It was all made with heart and love.
Yes. And Leslie. So
And
there you go.
Leslie.
Yes. So hope to see Andrea back, potentially with a less controversial narrative before and after, right?
Right.
That would be nice. She could just kind of enjoy her nomination and not have to go on a press tour apologizing for being nominated for an Oscar.
Yeah.
More on that later, perhaps. Okay, shall we get to our final losing nominee?
Yes.
All right, Michelle Williams in The Fabelmans. Michelle Williams gets her 5th Oscar nomination here for The Fabelmans, her 3rd in lead, after her double whammy back-to-back in 2010 and 2011 with Blue Valentine and My Week with Marilyn. So after My Week with Marilyn, she did a lot of bouncing back and forth between blockbuster films and indie films, with some bigger box office hits or commercial plays like Oz the Great and Powerful and The Greatest Showman, I Feel Pretty, also the first two Venom movies. And then on the indie side, she had Certain Women, she had Sweet Francais, Wonderstruck, and she also got her 4th Oscar nomination for Manchester by the Sea in 2016 in Supporting Actress. So she was also in All the Money in the World, for which she got rave reviews as well. She was one of the co-leads of the miniseries Fosse Verdon in 2019. And her portrayal of Gwen Verdon got her to sweep the TV award season, Emmy, Golden Globe, SAG, Critics' Choice, the whole thing. So then a few years later here, she's working with Steven Spielberg for the first time in The Fabelmans, which is a semi-autobiographical story about Spielberg's childhood as he struggled with family issues while also honing his skills as a future director. And Spielberg cast Michelle Williams because he was a fan of hers, and felt that her short blonde hair actually reminded him of his own mother. So the film follows a young Sammy Fabelman, the sort of Spielberg stand-in here, as he grows up with his sisters and their parents, Mitzi and Bert, played by Michelle Williams and Paul Dano. Bert is a much more scientific-minded and slightly distant emotionally parent, while Mitzi is artistically minded and encourages Sammy to follow his passion for filmmaking, while she is also exhibiting some eccentric behavior and perhaps undiagnosed manic depression. One day, after a camping trip that Sammy films, he discovers that Mitzi is having an affair with Bert's coworker friend, Benny, played by Seth Rogen, which rattles him. So there's much more to that as well after, but let's get right into it here with Michelle Williams, who is sadly at this point becoming a perennial bridesmaid at the Oscars. 5th nomination, 5th loss. But tell me your thoughts on Michelle overall and her somewhat divisive performance here in The Fabelmans.
Do you think it's weird to say that Michelle Williams is like underrated despite like being a consistent presence in Hollywood for like 20 years? Over 20 years now.
I think anyone who has 5 Oscar nominations is not underrated.
Fair enough.
But maybe should be rated higher than she even
I
is.
I think she should be rated higher because I'm a fan of Michelle Williams.
Okay.
I think she does great work all the time.
No argument for me.
But despite having 5 Oscar nominations, I feel like she never quite hits the A list. I feel like she's always like A minus, B plus list. But that's not to say anything of the quality of her work, which I think is always really good. I am like a really big fan of her in Blue Valentine. I think it's not only do I think it's her best nomination, I think it's just one of the best performances of that decade. And that is the performance that Steven Spielberg saw that inspired him to ask Michelle Williams to do the role. I really like her in Brokeback Mountain and Manchester by the Sea and those supporting turns. I really like her in a movie that I saw a long time ago that I haven't seen since, but I really want to revisit, and that's Sarah Polley's Take This Waltz, which she also stars in with Seth Rogen.
Heyo.
So I really like seeing Michelle Williams, and I like her in this film. I think she's not really one that you think of a lot when it comes to like face acting, but I think her face acting in this movie is bananas. I think there's a lot of scenes in this film where you just see her looking at things, and from the reaction that she has while she's seeing things, it says so much without saying a lot. So that's really positive. But even in the scenes where she does have to say a lot, I think she's really good in those scenes as well. I think she's a really strong pillar in this film, and I think we can get into the whole lead supporting thing here. But I personally, I'm just gonna wade into the controversy now, just so we can really discuss it. I think that she should have been supporting because I know this feels like an ensemble piece here, but Gabriel LaBelle is the definitive lead of this film.
Yeah.
And I think the story is his story, and the things that happen to Michelle Williams are kind of only explored in the ways that they affect Sammy Fabelman's upbringing.
Yeah.
That's a little bit why I feel like she's more of a supporting than a lead. I understand her inclination to want to put herself in lead because she is a big part of the movie.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I don't really think it is enough of Mitzi's story to justify the lead nomination. That's my personal opinion about it. I know a lot of people have arguments on both sides, and I know that this was a really, really big point of contention during this year.
Yeah. Yes. I do remember this performance was really debated a lot at the time for quite a few reasons. The first being that she did campaign lead here. Everyone, like I said, thought she was a front runner and supporting actress, and then when it was announced she was going lead, people kept accusing her of throwing away her Oscar and saying she made a bad call. I will go on record and say that I always supported this decision from her, especially because of how so many people these days go supporting, even when they have huge roles in their films, just because they aren't technically number one on the call sheet. But I also think films have multiple leads sometimes, and I think that's a little bit the case here. Yes, she's not the lead. It is Sammy Fabelman's story. But to me, watching it again, I find that her role is so prominent within so much of the film that I kind of have a hard time calling it a supporting performance. Plus, I think she just wants to be seen as a leading lady star, which I always support. More power to her. We're going to talk about that again next week with Lily Godstone at the same time. So I very rarely mind when these borderline cases like this go lead compared to them going supporting, because lead is just the more challenging category. So there's that. That's what I will say. But also, the nature of this role, not everyone, I think, was a fan of her kind of heightened theatrical style here in the middle of this mostly traditional family drama. But I think she fulfills the role well, and I'm not going to argue with Steven Spielberg in believing that she really channeled his mother, who was also very eccentric and spunky and dealt with mental health issues too. I generally prefer Michelle in more subtle roles because I just think that is her strong suit. But I do think she's putting in good work here. It's a little similar with Ana de Armas in that it feels like there's always a fragility happening that she's conveying beneath the surface, and a restlessness there that maybe for some people isn't always easy to watch, but I think is also true to life. And I like that she challenged herself here to do something that I think is outside of her comfort zone, to play a character like this, who is so center of attention, sucking up all the energy in the room, when she has, from what I can recall, very rarely done that in her career up to this point. So I like the performance. I don't think it's great necessarily. I'm not really blown away by it, but she does fulfill the role well enough that I'm not bothered by it like some people, I'll say.
Yeah, it does feel very different from her other performances, and I think that's kind of why I appreciate it a little
Mm-hmm.
bit because it
Yeah.
shows that like she has a lot of range.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I didn't watch Fosse Verdon and you did, so you can kind of
Yeah.
tell me what her performance was like there. I imagine that was a little
More
bit
of this
bigger.
energy. Yes.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it's her kind of trying to leave her comfort zone and doing different things, which is exciting.
Mm-hmm.
The like the scenes where she's driving when she's driving the kids in the tornado, that feels like a big scene there.
Yeah.
The argument that she has with Sammy right before his lifeguard test, that's I think one of the best scenes in the film. That following into the scene in the closet there. The bigger moments work for me. I don't think this is like her best performance, but I do think, regardless of whether it was in lead or supporting, it is a performance I would nominate.
Mm. Yeah. But you would pick supporting between the
But I
two.
would pick but I would
Okay.
pick supporting over
Yeah.
lead.
And I assume you would prefer her as a winner of supporting than what we got in reality, perhaps.
Yes, I would. Yes, I
Okay.
would.
Fair enough.
There's
Yes.
there's I want to there's one scene that I want to talk about that I really thought a lot about because you've been watching every Best Actress nominee for the past several years, and the scene specifically that I'm thinking of is that scene that happens right after the scene where she slaps him for the lifeguard test. At this point, Sammy knows that she's having an affair with Benny,
Mm-hmm.
and he brings her into the closet and shows her the reels that he's spliced together of all the moments of them together that he caught. And what I thought a lot about when I was watching herself in the edited footage was Charlotte Rampling in 45 years.
Oh,
That
nice.
scene
Yeah.
towards the end of the film when she's in the attic looking at the slideshow that her husband left up in that attic, that really reminded me a lot of that scene. And those are
Definitely.
both two really great scenes where the actress doesn't have to say anything, their body barely has to move.
Hmm.
But it says a lot just in those, not even like a minute
Yeah.
of film there, but it says so much. And I think that's a scene that really gets me there.
Yes, I want to definitely talk about that as well, because it starts with him showing the footage of their camping trip to the whole family. And I love her reaction to that as she's watching it, because she just has this look of total, almost like astonishment and gratitude that he's captured her in a very striking light. And she tells him, "You really see me." And that's something that really sort of plagues her, is feeling like she's not really being seen by her husband, which is partly what draws her to Benny, and is why she has such a special connection with Sammy, is that they have kind of similar wiring, I think, artistically. But yes, that is her best sequence when, after Sammy has grown distant from her and he's seen this footage and everything, and confronting him about why he's been so disrespectful to her lately, and screaming at him that, she's his mother, and they have that tussle and she hits him, but then she very instantly regrets it, I think. And there's just a lot of hurt, I think, in her face that is really well done from her, because she feels this connection with him starting to slip away. And she feels like he's the only one who really did see her. And now even he's grown distant from her. And that just sort of tears her apart. And then when she's watching the footage and it gradually dawns on her what Sammy is trying to convey by showing her this in private, just the flash of recognition there, and then the sort of deflation and the guilt, I think, is just very, very powerful. And they sort of quietly agree to keep it between them, which is just very heavy stuff, especially thinking about Steven Spielberg directing this behind the camera.
I kept on thinking about it during the whole film as I like this guy is basically just reliving
Childhood
his
trauma.
his childhood trauma,
Mm-hmm.
directing it and writing it himself. I was like, this is way too meta for me. But what I really love about that sequence too, and to also to speak just to A, the character of Stanley Fableman, and B, the person that is Steven Spielberg, you can tell in that scene that through this movie that he's spliced together, that Mitzi is learning things about herself that she might not have even really
Mm.
recognized, and saw them from a different perspective. And I think that's really like the power of filmmaking when you see things from angles and perspectives that you had never thought about before.
Yeah.
I want to rewind
Mm-hmm.
uh back to the camping trip sequence
Yeah.
because I think that's the other really dynamite scene that Michelle Williams has here. The sequence that she has where she's dancing in front of the car headlights.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's acted and shot really, really well. And I think Michelle Williams, who is kind of consistently like a B plus tier actress, when she's spinning around in that circle doing the pirouettes and Janusz Kaczynski is shooting her backlit, and you get the sequence moving from her to Seth Rogen's face and then back to her and then to Paul Dano's face.
Mm.
When I see her in that sequence, that is an A tier actress right there. I really
Wow.
think like she
Yeah.
nails that sequence so well.
Yeah. I think she's really leading with a spontaneity there in a way that she rarely has in her other performances. And again, people may say that this is over the top or mannered. I can sort of see that, but I think she is fulfilling what this character is, which is someone who is prone to these sort of whims and is very eccentric and free spirited to her family, but also kind of mysterious and sort of unknowable at the same time, because even though she's in lead here, this isn't her story. This is seen through Sammy's framework. And I think she does manage to kind of get into the cracks of who Steven Spielberg's mother may have been, but also he will never really know her fully either, which is also maybe what some people, I keep alluding to the fact that some people weren't as much fans of this performance. Maybe that is what some people had trouble with, is they felt like they couldn't quite connect all the way with what this character was in its entirety. But also that's kind of maybe the point too.
Right, because the thing that we have to remember about this film is that this is a film both coming from Sammy's perspective, but also coming from Steven Spielberg's perspective. So he can only know as much as he knows. He's adding a little bit of fictionalization here and there, but as far as I can really tell, I mean, like, I haven't read the script and I don't know the things that were from him or the things that were from Tony Kushner, but he's not going to really speculate too much about the things that he doesn't know about his mother.
Yeah.
Which is why there's bits of her that are mysterious in this film.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And then I think when they move to California eventually, that's when she starts to slightly disappear from the narrative, where it starts to focus more on Sammy. But she does have another really good scene, I think, on their move on the road, where she gets out of the car and she talks with Sammy about the affair and how she is intending to not be selfish, as she says, anymore, and to stay married to Bert, which sounds good on paper, but also in the way that she's performing it, she's showing how Mitzi is kind of resigning herself to just being miserable for the rest of her life. I think she's kind of demonstrating that, and that is where it makes sense where this is ultimately leading to, which is that there will be a separation.
Yeah. I think that's a scene that I really like. I like the way that she talks to Gabriel LaBelle. I like that she's on the ground when she's talking to him sitting against a fence, and he's up a little bit higher. So you can tell that it's kind of this, we're at a point here in that relationship between the two of them where he is kind of taking care of her a little bit more than she's taking care of him.
Yeah.
And it's that real reversal. It's another case of somebody kind of growing up a little bit faster than they would like to. And of course, this is a really common occurrence when there's this sort of family strife that leads to divorce here. But I think it's really portrayed well here. And I think that relationship between Sammy and his mother is really a core part of the film.
Yeah, it is the core of the film, ultimately, which is why I'm sort of okay with her being in lead again. But anyway, I also really just enjoy the moment, comedically speaking, because you just have a few comedic moments here that I enjoy, where Sammy and Bert are arguing at one point, and she gets up on the chair to sort of diffuse the tension and is proclaiming, "I started therapy." Just the sort of comedic timing I enjoy there.
Yeah, you laughed and I laughed.
Yes.
I think, yeah, this is certainly a film more than her other films that allows her to be funny.
Yeah, which is nice.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe if the first 90 minutes or so are Michelle as a lead, it does start to become more supporting as it goes on. I will concede that. But I do think her unhappiness really starts to sort of just swallow her up to the point that she just can't bear to live in this house anymore and just can't live without Benny. And it leads her and Bert to divorce and go back to Arizona. And I find that she just has a lot of sympathy there for her kids when they're having that sit down with them and they're explaining it. But it's also the kind of thing where it's like she's tried everything, and this is the only way that she can survive is to escape. Sadly, it sort of reminds me of The Hours in that way, of just
right. Yeah,
like what Julianne Moore is going through there.
Yeah, that's completely understandable, and I agree. I think she in that scene she does a good job of explaining what's going on, and you've been with the character for a bit at this point, so you know where she's coming from when she says that she does need to go back to Arizona to be with Benny. And
Yeah.
it's kind of at this point that she kind of ends up leaving the film,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of a bummer and also why I put her in supporting over lead. But you do miss her when she's gone.
Yeah. I think
Yeah,
some people do. Yes.
some people do.
I think she is ultimately a very flawed character, which is also something people may struggle with, is
Hmm.
some of those more what you could call selfish choices that she makes. Some people might have trouble with, which I
Yeah.
understand. But I think by the time we get to the final scene, I think we get to a point of appreciation for the complexity that Michelle was able to show with this character and asking Sammy to basically forgive her for that slapping him that one time because she just needs closure there. And you can tell that she's been tormented by that as she's been away from the family. But yeah, they kind of come to terms. He forgives her, and she admits that while she does still love their father, it is just what her heart is telling her to do is to be in Arizona. So, like I said, even if you could maybe be a little exasperated by this character and how much oxygen she sucks up throughout a lot of this, you do at least understand where she's coming from, perhaps, by the end.
Yeah, I think you do. I think I do
Yeah.
at the very least, and that's why it works for me personally. I think this is a good performance, and it's definitely outside of her wheelhouse. And I'd like to see her do more stuff that allows her to have more range like this.
Yeah.
Because it is good to branch out.
Hmm.
I like everything that she's done up to this point that I've seen because I haven't seen everything, but I've seen quite a bit.
They do like Oz the Great and Powerful.
Oh, I do not remember 1 second of Oz the Great and
She
Powerful.
plays
If you told
Glinda.
she is one of the many people in film history that has played Glinda,
Yes.
and certainly
Not the
I'm gonna
last.
say that certainly not the last, and I was gonna say this is I mean certainly the most forgettable.
Wow. Okay.
Sorry to okay.
Jesus. What a
I
way to
say
end the
like,
Michelle Williams segment.
well, I didn't know that we were gonna end it
I
on
didn't
talking
either.
about
But
Oz
here
the
we
Great and
are.
Powerful, a film that very certifiably does not
Does not
exist.
exist.
Does not exist. It's weird to think that like, oh, we're in Wicked season. We've been in Wicked season for 4 months, and we're talking all about the Wiz and the Wizard of Oz and all these other iterations of the film. Nobody mentions Oz the Great and Powerful.
I think for good
And
reason.
I don't think anybody needs to. You
I
said
don't.
for good
Oh,
reason.
whoops.
Ah,
Yes.
that's a
Very good.
little teaser. That's a little teaser for November when
Hmm.
we'll be attending a screening of Wicked for good.
Wow. Shall we get to our winner?
Let's get to our winner.
Michelle Yeoh for Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Here we go. Michelle Yeoh winning her Oscar on her first nomination, making history as the first South Asian actress to be nominated for and win Best Actress, and only the second woman of color after Halle Berry. So, a lot to introduce with Michelle Yeoh, but I'll try to keep it brief. Michelle was born Yeoh Chu Kang in Ipoh, Perak, Malaysia. She grew up speaking multiple languages, including English, Malay Chinese, and Malaysian Cantonese. At first, she was interested in ballet, but she suffered an injury that then made her opt for an alternate plan in choreography. She was also a model, winning Miss Malaysia World in 1983. Her first acting role was in a commercial with Jackie Chan, and that led her to be discovered, and she started a thriving career in Hong Kong as an action star, performing all her own stunts in films like Yes, Madam, Police Story 3 Super Cop, The Heroic Trio, and Executioners, becoming a pretty well-respected star there. And then she crossed over to Hollywood in 1997 for Tomorrow Never Dies, which made her stardom worldwide. And she continued to rise when she starred in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon a few years later, earning a BAFTA nomination for that, and the film going on to 10 Oscar nominations. So her career was up and down from there, doing quite a few supporting parts in Hollywood films like Memoirs of a Geisha, Sunshine, The Mummy, Tomb of the Dragon. She started to rise to prominence again in the mid to late 2010s with a role on Star Trek Discovery and then Crazy Rich Asians, which got her some Oscar buzz, and it was a huge financial success. She was in Shang-Chi. So this kind of started a second wave period of success for Michelle. And then we have Everything Everywhere All at Once, which offered her the opportunity to show pretty much all of her talents as an actress. So this is written and directed by Daniel Kwan and Daniel Scheinert, and they originally wrote it with Jackie Chan in mind for the lead, but they eventually changed it to a female protagonist with Michelle Yeoh in mind. So this is a genre-bending, absurdist sci-fi comedy drama about a laundromat owner named Evelyn Wong, played by Michelle, a Chinese immigrant working in America alongside her husband Waymond, played by Ke Huy Quan. They have an adult daughter, Joy, Stephanie Hsu, with whom Evelyn has a strained relationship. So one day, when they're about to be audited by the IRS, Waymond's body is suddenly taken over by a parallel version of Waymond from another universe called Alpha Waymond, who informs her of the many parallel universes out there and how the alpha version of Evelyn has died after developing a verse-jumping technology which involved performing random weird actions like eating a stick of chapstick and things like that allow you to inhabit different universes and learn new skills. So he informs her that the alpha version of Evelyn pushed the alpha version of Joy too hard, and now Joy is intent on destroying the multiverse, and only this version of Evelyn can stop her. So once Evelyn takes all of that in, she is confused and suspicious at first, but soon sees the potential of being able to see alternate versions of her life and of escaping her sort of humdrum existence in this timeline to accept her new destiny. So yes, there was a lot there, but let's talk our very exciting winner here, Michelle Yeoh. Tell me your relationship with Michelle Yeoh and her big career-defining, Oscar-winning performance here.
Michelle Yeoh is great. I think she is one of the great action stars. I mean, it's people, Americans. I mean, this is me like being generalized about Americans, quote unquote, being like, oh, you got like Sylvester Stallone and you got Arnold Schwarzenegger, you've got others. But I think like
Others.
Michelle, oh, okay, but you know,
Yes.
the general big action stars are like,
Mm-hmm.
these are the definitive people. Michelle Yeoh is one of the definitive people. All of those Hong Kong action movies that you mentioned in her introduction, Yes, Madam, which I remember hearing about that movie and being like, I want to watch this movie. I can't find it anywhere. I remember we went to that video store and I
Mm.
got a copy of the Cantonese DVD and I watched it and I'm like, this is incredible. And then I watched The Heroic Trio and I watched Executioners. But of course, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is one of my favorite films of all time. I love this movie so much, and I think Michelle Yeoh is such a great part of that film. I think she's doing things that nobody else can do in that movie
Mm-hmm.
because it's very, very difficult to be an action star, but it's even more difficult to be an action star and an actor at the same time. And I think she's really, really capable of doing that. I think she's great at drama. I think she's great at comedy. And I think all of those elements really come together in this film that is basically made for her. And the one thing that I like about this particular film that I feel like puts it a level above the other films in this lineup for me is that like it is a perfect example of an actress being collaborative and working really well in an ensemble with other people. The thing about the performances in To Leslie and in Tar even and a little bit in The Fabelmans is that well, maybe not in the Fabelmans, but at least in Blonde and Tar and To Leslie, is that they're very much centered on this one person. The whole movie is about them.
Yeah.
Everything Everywhere All at Once relies on Michelle Yeoh's capability to work with Kiwi Kwan and to work with Stephanie Hsu and to work with Jamie Lee Curtis. And she has
And to work with Harry
such
Shum Jr.
and to work with Harry Shum Jr.,
Thank
Glee's
you.
Harry Shum Jr., multiple SAG nominee and winner.
Yes.
And she is able to work so effortlessly with all of these people and work through the antagonistic relationship with her daughter and with the alternate version of her daughter and with her husband and the alternate version of her husband and with Jamie Lee Curtis and the wrestling alternate version of Jamie Lee Curtis and the version of Jamie Lee Curtis with hot dog hands. I think that because she can work so well with everyone in this movie, I think that makes it a really big success.
Hmm.
That's something for me that really elevates her performance here.
Yeah. It is a true ensemble. I love this performance, and I love this movie. I love Michelle Yeoh, so this was a very good Oscars for me, just saying that up front. And it's strange, I think, because this is not the kind of movie that I would normally like.
I that is for sure.
Okay.
This feels very out of place amongst all the other films that you enjoy because you're very much someone that likes a realist sort of film.
Yes.
You love the family dramas. You love the films about like strong women in these difficult situations.
Social realism. Yes.
Social realism is the name of the game. When I'm
Yes.
going to see Sonic the Hedgehog, you're like, have fun. I will be staying home.
Yes. I'll be staying home and watching The Nest.
Yes. But when you have this movie here that's full of just the wackiest things that have ever been in a Best Picture nominee,
Let alone winner. Yeah.
it is surprising that you're like, this is one of my films.
Yes. I have a lot of film Twitter friends with similar tastes to mine that are more lukewarm on this, and some that don't even like it at all. So that is kind of strange for me, but I think it's a acquired taste, perhaps, kind of movie where either you vibe with it or you don't, and I get that. But for me, what I think I really connected to is just the emotional undercurrent of it and just the sort of themes it's grappling with, the idea of having regrets and worrying you didn't choose the right path in life, and just kind of grappling with the kind of person you want to be in the world and the relationships you have with the people in your life. I think all of that really just resonated with me. And also that it is presented in such a creative, original way. I think it's just such a feat of direction and writing. But there are also a lot of wacky elements to it that aren't necessarily my thing taken individually, but I think it's the performances and these characters that really draw me in. And so I feel like I'm just kind of along for the ride with them. And so, like, you know, Michelle Yeoh was someone that I had a pretty solid relationship with before this for a lot of her Hollywood work and Crouching Tiger. Loved her in Crazy Rich Asians. Thought she should have gotten an Oscar nomination for that. I hadn't seen some of her early work in Hong Kong until after this, I think, but she just has a really cool presence and a steely presence too, I think, and her physicality, I think, is so rare to see among actresses of a certain age. And there's just such a great sort of almost ballet quality to her choreography at times that I just really am taken by. And she just gets to explore so much here on a technical level and an emotional level. And this is where I also want to say something else about this whole race, which hopefully won't stoke the flames of the Cate versus Michelle wars that happened with this race at the time. But when you had so many stands of Cate's performance in Tar who were claiming that she had the most technically demanding job of all the nominees, that she had the highest difficulty level, she learned German, she learned to conduct. Yes, all that is true, and I agree, she did an incredible job with it, but it did kind of drive me crazy because Michelle here has so many things to do. Like, granted, this is a more action-based type of performance compared to Cate and Tar, but it is just as worthy of being seen as a huge achievement. The physicality, speaking multiple languages herself, balancing comedy and the emotional heft of Evelyn's arc and making you care about this person who has her flaws and isn't always the most easy to get along with, but you understand by the end of the film why she is the way she is, why her difficult upbringing with her father made it hard to connect with her daughter because of that, generational trauma, to quote Jamie Lee Curtis, and how her dream of a new life in America did lead to disappointment. I think she carries the weight of all of that just on her face and in the way that she looks at her husband. And when she's getting frustrated at the IRS office, and also this kind of mental block she gets when she's trying to be nice to Joy, and then to also be funny on top of that as she's trying to learn all these new rules about the multiverse. And when the plot is really set into motion, her bluntness there and her comedic timing, all of that is so impressive to me. And this really is just the role of a lifetime, where it's like the right actress lined up perfectly with the right part at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, there is no other role like this in this category. In 95 years of Oscar history, there's never been
Yeah.
anything like this before.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly think that's a big factor into how it won.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there are so many great action heroines over the last 50 years of film, and they repeatedly get looked over because action is not as difficult as being a real actor and getting deep into the character. And I just think that's not true. I think that the physicality in this performance is crazy. And to think that she's delivering this same amount of physicality 22 years after Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon is bananas.
Mm-hmm.
And I
And
think
even longer from that after her movies in Hong Kong.
yeah, at this point, she'd been doing this stuff for at least 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it deserves a lot of respect. The only other instance of a Best Actress winning performance containing some sort of action that I can think of, and I did some digging here, is I guess Hilary Swank in Million Dollar Baby, where she's playing a boxer.
Yeah.
But there is not a second of humor in Million Dollar Baby.
No, there is not.
No, there is not.
But I will say,
Mm-hmm.
there is one I'm thinking of, which is Marie
Yep.
Dressler in Min and Bill. She does have a
Okay.
big knockout, drag-out fight that is very funny and very action-based, but that is just one
Okay.
scene. So,
Yep, it's not
This is-
sustained
right.
throughout the entire film.
So always have to bring up Marie Dressler, but continue.
Yeah, I think it's just a full package
Mhm.
sort of deal here. You don't see something like this every day. And I don't want to get too much into it because I know that we might get into it a little bit in the questions, but
Mhm.
just this happening for an Asian actress is a really big deal just in the course of Hollywood history,
Yeah.
because there's just so much disrespect for Asian actresses throughout. And for this to really land with Michelle Yeoh in a role that feels like the absolute culmination of an entire career. I really want to talk about the more dramatic scenes that she's in, because we've mentioned the comedy and we've mentioned the action, the martial arts that she's doing here. But those scenes that really blew my mind the first time I saw this film, and I love revisiting every time I see it again, is the scenes where she gets a glimpse into the life where she would have been Michelle Yeoh
Yeah.
is so captivating and so interesting. And you see her choosing to not move to America and be with Kiwi Kwan and instead learn martial arts and become an action star. And all of the scenes that they flash there are scenes of her at red carpets for her films that she's been in the past 20 years.
Mhm.
It's so interesting. And the scenes that she has with the alternate version of Ke Huy Quan are the scenes that I think people remember the most about this film.
Yes. I just think they just have such strange but beautiful chemistry between the two of them, which I just love all of their scenes together. And I love all of the scenes of her with Stephanie Hsu in terms of her kind of prickliness and her walls that come up as whenever she's in conversation with her, and having these moments even in like the beginning where she wants to say something to her that is meaningful, that she loves her or something, and then she loses her nerve and is like, you have to try and eat healthier, you're getting fat. And just like the way that Stephanie plays off of that is quite heartbreaking too. But you can also see, even after Evelyn says that, there's a little bit of like a little bit of guilt that she can't really be more of that loving person, perhaps, that she kind of wants to be, but for whatever reason she can't bring herself to say.
Right. It's a thing that's difficult for her because of her relationship with another person in this film that I failed to mention, which is that the great James Hong is also
Yes.
in this film
Mm-hmm.
as her father, and that relationship there informs a lot of the difficulties that she has with her daughter.
Yeah, it's the generational trauma, like I said.
Yep, these films are about trauma, as Jamie Lee Curtis likes to say.
Yes.
But also we can have some fun here as we're dissecting said trauma.
Right, exactly. And I also just really like how she becomes this audience surrogate, really, when all of the plot gets into motion, where suddenly, like, her husband is turned into this super agent who's giving her all these instructions and then is, again, dazzling her with this sort of alternate timeline that would allow her to escape her shitty life and everything she's going through in the IRS agency and everything, how that just demoralizes her and makes her choose that alternate path. And even though it is so bewildering to her at first, in a way, it's like, it's better than trying to figure out taxes,
Right.
And from there, I find that she really just grounds all of this in a reality, which is very difficult to do, I can imagine, considering all of the shit that's happening in this movie.
I don't know how they did it.
Yes.
I do not know how they did it.
Yeah, but she's able to really show her comedic timing there in a way that I think she isn't often able to do in a lot of her other roles. Just the bluntness in her delivery is really great. Like when the, Alpha Waymond is explaining to her about how, I'm not really your husband. And she just like cuts him off at one point and she's like, very busy today, I don't have time to help you. And just, those little moments I think are great.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's another one that I enjoy about when Waymond is telling her about how, like, this is basically the worst version of any Evelyn out there. And she's just like, I can't be the worst. What about that hot dog one?
Yeah. It's funny. She's funny in the movie.
Yeah.
I like the scene after she first confronts Stephanie Hsu as the evil, quote unquote evil Jobu Tupaki or whatever. Yes. Whatever variation Michelle Yeoh calls her at various points in the film.
Yes.
Where they're together.
Chewbacca.
And she is explaining to her version, her universe's Joy and Waymond about how they're behaving like that movie Rakakuni.
Yes, of course.
That entire sequence is very, very funny. Yes. And it also advances the plot, and it also informs how she's understanding what's going on in this film. And because she's the audience surrogate, she's the best way that we can understand what's going on.
Yeah, it's a wild balancing act here.
And to that point, this category is so famously unfriendly to comedic performances.
Right.
As well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another thing that I would normally put as a strike against it. And for some reason here, it's really a strength towards that win, I think.
Yeah, because it's not just comedy. It's so many things all at once, you could say.
Mm-hmm. I'd say so.
Yes, but I just think the way that the film and her performance, they just both modulate the emotional journey there of coming to terms with what's happening, trying to keep up with all the rules about verse jumping and doing all these absurd tasks like chewing on chapstick and giving herself a paper cut or saying I love you to the IRS agent in order to learn all these powers from different versions of herself, and how she begins to understand. But also she has a lot of moments where she's also kind of like this is stupid. Why do I have to do all of this? And she's kind of in a bit of denial mode, but then is gradually seeing the potential in all of this. Like when she does jump into that, like Michelle Yeoh version of herself,
Hmm.
and the pride that she has in seeing that life. And then she jumps back to her own reality and kind of carelessly tells Waymond that back in that universe, her life was so great and how she never should have left with him. And he's
That
crushed by that. And she
that's
just
such
says
a
it
it's
so
such an
coldly.
interesting scene
Mm-hmm.
because she's been thrown into this sort of situation. It's hasn't even been like an hour, but she is falling into these possibilities of what could have been to the point where this this divorce, which also is like kind of a plot line during the movie, is that like Waymond is about to try to start to get a divorce to Evelyn because their marriage
Mm-hmm.
is going so poorly. Just trying to a lot of the one of the non fantastical plot lines of this film is just trying to save this marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way that they go about it by meeting each other in all these other lives is really compelling.
And when she does ultimately get to display some of those kung fu skills and everything and perform her own stunts, I think it is really like watching a master at work there, just the athleticism and the whole thing when like the sign spinner stuff and she's kicking ass and just the choreography is great. But she's really starting to come into her power and there's more of a confidence in her posture there in how she starts to carry the action and realize that she needs to learn how to be more like Jobu Tupaki in order to defeat her. But then over time, the more time she spends with this alternate version of Joy, she kind of gets sucked into that void of negativity where nothing matters. And it's just like, this is just the easiest way to be is nihilistic and that nothing matters. Therefore, who cares, basically, is the sentiment, which is interesting how she kind of starts to fall into that. Like when we get that back to reality, where she's drunkenly taking the mic at the New Year's Eve party and is ranting about how life is meaningless and it's just laundry and taxes, and nothing really matters. I find that scene to be surprisingly effective because it's very short, but just the way that she kind of cynically is doubling down on her cruelty and making eye contact with Waymond as she signs the divorce papers. The way she plays that, it's sort of like how freeing it is to just sort of give in to all her cynicism and her frustrations rather than really fight for anything, fight for what's right, or like putting in the work to repair these relationships. So, I mean, that's something that I think a lot of people are facing right now who feel demoralized after this recent election, even how people just want to check out and ignore what's happening because there's nothing to be done. The world is going to end soon, so who cares? And it's just easy to kind of get sucked into that doom spiral, I suppose. I think she conveys that very well.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that is definitely like that her character's like lowest point here. But I also really like the next sequences there where she is remembering her life with Waymond and the way
Yes.
that they've grown up together.
How he pulls her out
And
of that. Yeah.
yeah, there's that sequence where it's just flashing between both of their faces as she's coming to terms with how much she really loves women, and it always really touches me. And I think Ke Huy Quan really is the heart of this movie, and I think it wouldn't succeed as much without him. And again, like you said, I think their chemistry works really well in all of their scenes together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where she's really seeing the Waymond that she fell in love with, who is kind and generous, and realizing how she took him for granted. And ultimately, sort of part of the message here is how it's okay to sort of embrace the chaos, embrace the absurdity, because life is absurd and it's often not that great, but there are silver linings within that, and you don't have to give in to the negativity just because it's easy, and that he has this alternate way of fighting, even if it doesn't look like fighting, you know?
Yeah. And I think one of the best scenes in the film, and it's actually, I think it's the clip that they showed, is the scene with her and
Yeah.
Stephanie Shu at the end, where she talks about how things are difficult with them and things are always going to be kind of off about it, but that she's always going to be there for her and that she's always going to want to be there with her. And
Yes.
it's a really great dramatic sequence, and it just the tone in her voice and like the warmth and love that she has there for her daughter, despite everything that has happened over the past like couple hours of the movie, really, I think nails for me why this is more than just an action performance.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I love that line reading that everyone will remember, of course, which is, I will always, always want to be here with you. And the emphasis she puts on that second always, I think, really is such a knockout moment that really gets to me every time. And their hug after, I mean, it seems cheesy to talk about it like this, but I think that just speaks to the strength of the execution here and of her performance, that she's able to make all of these things that could have been very corny, perhaps, about love and recognizing, these very sort of basic empathy types of things, making that all feel fresh, I suppose.
Yeah, this is a film that is at its core about family, and it's necessary for the viewer to believe her as a daughter and as a husband and as a mother, and she pulls off all of those roles perfectly in this film. And I think that's like that's like the great strength of the film and of her performance here, is that it's, as you said, it's like perfectly calibrated.
Yeah. So I love this performance very much. I'm so glad that this happened for her in her career. And even if it is never like this again, and maybe she doesn't get another nomination or she doesn't quite have another role like this, I think literally any actor would dream of a role like this that seems so perfectly calibrated to their abilities. And they nail it to this extent that they shatter the odds and actually go on and win an Oscar for this kind of performance in this kind of film.
And I think this is an inflection point for Best Actress going forward,
Yeah.
for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Because without this film, I don't think Emma Stone wins for Poor Things. And without this film, I don't know if Demi Moore potentially wins for The Substance. It
Mm-hmm.
allowed them to say, we can look beyond biographical performances and like
Traditional dramatic fare. Yeah.
traditional dramatic fare and open up to allowing fantasy performances and science fiction performances to be seen on the same level as what we traditionally accept to be Academy Award winning roles.
Yeah. So I'd say that is a net positive. Yeah.
Net positive.
All right. Well, on that note, let's get to the Oscars here. So for the precursors, again, it was pretty much a two-horse race from the start. But Cate Blanchett won the trifecta of New York Film Critics, LA Film Critics, and National Society of Film Critics, as well as several regionals. Michelle Yeoh won the National Board of Review in Boston and online, and many other regionals of her own, as well as the Independent Spirit Award. So with the major precursors, Blanchett won the Golden Globe for drama, Michelle Yeoh won for comedy, and then from there, Blanchett won the Critics' Choice, Yeoh won the SAG Award, and Blanchett won at BAFTA. So it was very much a close race between the two of them going into the Oscars. They were also the only two who got nominated at every major precursor among those who were ultimately nominated at the Oscars. But Ana de Armas was relatively close with nominations at Globe, SAG, and BAFTA. Michelle Williams kind of mirrored contenders of the previous 2 years that we've talked about, which is Andra Day and Kristen Stewart, who got in at Critics' Choice and Golden Globe, but were not recognized at SAG or BAFTA, but still made it in at the Oscars anyway. And then we have Andrea Riseborough, who is her own category unto herself, barely showed up at any precursors. She got a Chicago Film Critics nomination and an Independent Spirit Award nomination, and I'm pretty sure that's it, which is wild. But on the back of many A-listers spreading the word, she gained some that grassroots momentum, mostly by the film's director, as well as Frances Fisher, very key player in all this. And they managed to do the unthinkable and got Andrea Riseborough nominated. That was kind of the shocker of the morning.
It's the little film that could.
Yeah.
For
Small
better
film,
or for
big
worse.
heart. Yes. So with all of that said, why do we think Michelle Yeoh won this Oscar?
I think it's for a lot of the reasons that we said here, all of the different elements that went into this film that really make it distinct from everything else. They loved this film to a degree that I would have never possibly imagined. So many nominations,
11.
7 wins
Yeah.
for a film that you would have never imagined that they would go for. They love this film, and I certainly think that also helped boost her towards that win. This is something else that I was kind of thinking about while we were watching all these films back to back, and I don't know if this is really a factor or not, because I know that the Lydia Tarr performance is like really technically complicated, but just like on a really just like basic level. It is really easy to root for the character of Evelyn Wong. She's trying to reconnect with her family, and in the end of the story, she is able to reconnect with her husband and with her daughter and start on the path towards a life that's more fulfilling for her. And Lydia Tarr is a villain, and we know that in outside of certain circumstances, they generally don't like to reward villainous women.
No, they don't. Not at all, actually. Other than a Kathy Bates once in a while.
Yeah.
Very rare. Yeah.
So I think that might have been something that gave more of an edge to Michelle Yeoh here over Cate Blanchett.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was probably a very close final result between her and Kate. I think it is clear that the British/European contingent of the Academy was not as on board with Everything Everywhere compared to American voters. It did very poorly at BAFTA. I don't know if you remember that. Not even Ke Huy Quan won there, despite him sweeping everywhere else. Yes. I think it only won film editing from BAFTA. So,
wow.
Yeah. And the Golden Globes weren't really huge fans either, because they famously gave their comedy picture to Banshees of Inisherin. But when you look at SAG, for example, and how huge of an embrace Everything Everywhere had there, winning for Michelle and Key and Jamie Lee Curtis, who had zero momentum up to that point, and Ensemble, it's kind of undeniable that this was just the film of the moment. And Michelle's performance is so integral to the success of the film, and part of why you love it as much as you did, even if you weren't as initially on board with some of the wackier moments and the stylistic stuff. She is the emotional heart of it, and Key is as well, which is why he won too.
Yep.
And I think obviously Kate is a huge part of Tar and that success as well, but I think she did have a few things that weren't as in her favor, which is that she already had 2 Oscars. Not that that stopped them from doing it with Frances. I know that was something.
Or Meryl.
Or Meryl, but it is extremely rare. Those are exceptions to the rule. So yep. I also think when you do compare the 2 characters, like you said, Evelyn is a lot easier to embrace than Lydia Tarr, and they do struggle with difficult women. And I just also think there was a refreshing quality to Michelle and her sort of candidacy. I don't know what else you could call it.
Right,
of
yeah.
Her. She's never nominated before. She's a hardworking actress who has had worldwide success for decades, getting this role of a lifetime. And that's, this feels like a role of a lifetime for Kate as well. But I don't know if it was a huge surprise factor that sort of motivated people to feel like voting for her.
Right. It's a sort of thing where, like, when the log line came out that Todd Field is doing a film with Cate Blanchett, the nomination was kind of already set in stone. Like, you knew whatever was going to come out, it was going to be great, and they were going to nominate it. When Everything Everywhere All at Once premiered at South by Southwest, people are like, this is an amazing film. I don't know who's going to go for it.
Right.
Because it's so different from everything else that's been out, but it's certainly something to see. So when it makes this journey all the way to the Oscars, it's really kind of undeniable.
Yeah, I think so. And I know it may sound dismissive. This is not necessarily how I feel about it, but I could imagine some voters feeling like Kate is incredible in Tar. She's often incredible, but is incredible in an expected way, ultimately. And that is just kind of why they went more to Michelle, is that they never knew she was capable of this, perhaps. Plus, I think Michelle Yeoh's campaign was pretty much flawless, and she really wanted it. She did so many interviews. I don't know if you remember, but it was like she was on every single talk show, basically. And you compare it to Cate, and she was like, she did a lot of, interviews too, but she was at Critics' Choice winning her award there and being like, maybe there shouldn't be award shows. And it's like, well, when you compare that to
maybe not, yeah.
Michelle and making it clear that she wanted it and was pounding the pavement to get it, the choice was perhaps clear for a lot of voters.
Yeah. I remember that crew was everywhere that whole season, especially Jamie Lee Curtis.
Oh, yes.
Who was out and about in front.
She was the cheerleader.
Yep. Which might have ended up being part of her win. Because she was certainly super visible. Maybe even more outside of the film than inside the film.
That's actually true. Yes.
Yep.
Because watching it again, I'm just like, I do not see anything worthy of a nomination, let alone a win here from Jamie Lee Curtis, but that is for another show.
Yep, that's a completely different conversation.
Yes. So I was just extremely happy for Michelle. I mean, I would have accepted a Cate win because it's one of the best performances we've seen this decade, and she's an incredible actress. But it does sort of feel like if we have two all-timers here, I feel much better about the one who may not have this again, this moment.
Yep, I agree with that. And that's really like the thing about it for me is that like, I know for a fact that we will see 2 or 3, maybe 4 more Cate Blanchett nominations in our lifetime. I don't know if Michelle Yeoh gets to come back here.
Right.
So it feels like a big deal that she's here, and I feel like it's a big deal that she wins.
Yes. And that it's not just a campaign type of win either, that she really did earn it with the performance itself,
Yep, I agree.
Okay. Shall we get to Twitter questions and Instagram questions and Blue Sky questions?
Lots of questions.
Yes.
I wrote down responses for every question I felt equipped to answer.
Okay, that's good. All right. Celluloid Siren. Is Michelle Yeoh's performance the most varied in terms of skills, martial arts, emotional groundedness, comedy, characterization, utter ridiculousness to win in this category? Or is there another winner that required as many different abilities from an actress that won?
My answer to this question is yes. No other winning performance has contained not only comedy and drama, but action as well.
Yeah, just the variety of different things that are asked of her. I don't think anyone else comes close to what she's doing here. Although I think a lot of those criteria do sort of apply to the next year's winner too, with Emma Stone and Poor Things. So, like you said, there's a clear pattern happening here.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Even she doesn't compare to what Michelle is asked to do here. Christoph, kind of similar. Is this the most perfect Best Actress win? A great actress wins for a great performance that nobody else but her could have given, and that draws from her career and her image. And it is also a great film that will probably be remembered as one of the best and most defining of her career.
I think it's hard to define like most perfect, but it definitely feels like the most of many Best Actress wins, like the culmination of a career.
Yeah. In terms of everything crystallizing, yes. I feel like this may sound like a strange comparison, but the only other one I can think of is Julia Roberts for Erin Brockovich, which is ironically also a year where people like to talk about a more heavyweight contender and Ellen Burstyn and Requiem for a Dream there as well. But I think just the sheer star power and the magnetism of Julia after that incredible run she had in the 90s, it's a little bit similar for me.
I think that feels similar. The difference there for me obviously is that Erin Brockovich win comes much earlier in Julia Roberts' career than it does for Michelle Yeoh. But it is the sort of the similar thing where this is somebody that's on a run and this is really like the peak.
Yeah.
I still think it's the peak for her.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's like a hot take.
Dante VPF 88. Is Everything Everywhere going to be a classic or will it be forgotten in time?
Of all the Best Picture winners, I think it'll be more remembered than most, but I wouldn't put it in like the classic category. It feels more like a unique object, but like in a positive sense. It's not like we're going to put this one up with The Godfather and Gone with the
Casablanca.
Wind and Casablanca. But it's certainly not one of those. It's not, we're not going to dump it in the bin with like A Man for All Seasons and Oliver and Gigi. This is one that people will remember.
Or Coda.
Coda,
Um,
oof,
yeah.
oof.
I think it'll be different things to different people. I think it's healthy now that people aren't constantly talking about it like they were at the time. I think it became very over discussed during this award season, and there were backlashes happening too, and people saying it was overrated and all this stuff. I think I'll just say we're going to wait and see. It's only been 2 years since these wins as of this recording. I think the people who love it will continue to love it, and those who don't will not. It's not going to be universal. Okay, Stephanie Kane. Thoughts on Michelle Yeoh's Instagram post that she eventually took down? Did she break Academy rules, or was that whole debacle blown out of proportion? What would you have advised if you were part of her PR team? Okay, well, to remind people of what that was, Michelle Yeoh shared an article that had multiple slides on Instagram, so it was the whole article, and one of the slides said something to the effect of, like, Cate gave a great performance, but she's won twice. A win for Michelle would be a major moment for Asian actors, where like the Academy has issues with that in the past. So people were kind of thinking that was disparaging Cate, and people were outraged that to the point of like they wanted Michelle's nomination to be rescinded, basically for breaking Academy rules, because this was during voting that she posted that. So that's what that was.
That sounds like a whole bunch of hullabaloo over not very much.
Yeah, I think the way that the rules were said at the time, I could be misreading it. I think the breaking of that rule, which is like you can't disparage a fellow nominee during voting, is that like Michelle herself would have had to say these things. I don't think it really applies to like someone sharing someone else's words. Again, could be wrong about that, but it was taken down shortly after that. This was also posted like 6 hours before the close of voting, so most people probably already voted already. But yes, who knows if Michelle even actually did post it, because it could have just been someone on her team that was like erroneously doing this.
Yeah.
So I think there was enough like plausible deniability, I guess, that it was sort of okay in the end.
Yeah, I think I think it definitely is something that like maybe made a little bit of a ripple during the period of that campaign, but I had completely forgotten that it happened, so.
Champ JMCN2, did some people think Michelle Yeoh would lose because they didn't think another woman of color would win in this category again?
I mean, what was your take on the temperature at the time?
I think there was a fair assumption, just based on history, that the Academy could run into the same issue they always have with not rewarding women of color. That's why it was such a close race, I think, partly too, is that bias factoring that in. I think that was a little bit part of it.
Yeah,
not the whole thing.
Not the whole thing, but this is this race wasn't like other years where it was a runaway for Michelle Yeoh. There was a real possibility that she could have lost this Oscar.
Mm-hmm. Jamie, are there any other Michelle Yeoh performances you would have nominated for the Oscar? And do you think she ever got close to a nomination previously?
Michelle Yeoh should have been nominated for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, as well as other people that were also in the cast of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon.
Yes.
I also think it's a little ridiculous that she was not nominated in Supporting Actress for Crazy Rich Asians. That should have been a nomination as well.
Yes, those are the two. She should have 3 nominations by now, I think. I agree. And I think she was in the top 10 for Crouching Tiger because, again, she got a BAFTA nomination for that. So I think she was definitely on the radar in a film nominated for Best Picture, but that was probably it.
Yeah.
Luca, do you see Michelle Yeoh being nominated again? If yes, what kind of role?
I would like to see Michelle Yeoh nominated again, perhaps for another outside the box performance, but the Academy is certainly more amenable to these types of roles nowadays. I think it's less likely that she gets nominated than some of the other like more frequent people that we see, but I don't think it's an impossible thing. I think it could happen.
Yes, here's what I'll say. I think Michelle Yeoh is not an actress who typically does awards friendly films. You know, she likes action, she likes sci-fi, she likes having fun. So I don't know if she will be chasing that by any means, obviously. But right now, she is in a film nominated for 10 Oscars, Wicked. And if she puts in a supporting performance that people think is worthy in a film that they really like, I think she is enough on the radar now with them that she could probably get a supporting nomination, right? Down the line.
I would agree. I think a supporting nomination for Michelle Yeoh is more likely than a leading nomination.
Yeah.
Which is fine by me. I mean, like I would like to just see her nominated at all again. That would be
Yeah,
great.
I agree. Andy Bayless, I am very happy that Michelle Yeoh won, but would have voted for Cate Blanchett. What is another history-making win you are happy with, but would have also voted for someone else to win?
The one that I thought of was the Halle Berry win. I would have voted for Sissy Spacek.
Well, you stole my answer, because that was
Okay,
literally
great.
what I was going to say. Yes. Also, Renee Zellweger's great in Bridget Jones. Nicole is great in Moulin Rouge. There were options that year, but I would never take away that Oscar from Halle Berry because that's such a
Yeah,
great moment.
right.
Yeah. Dan B. Michelle Yeoh is the first Asian actress to win this award. Name some other actresses of Asian descent you would have loved to see nominated.
Not only should have Zhang Zi been nominated for Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, but she was actively passed over for Memoirs of a Geisha despite getting a Globe, BAFTA, and SAG nomination.
Yeah, very rude.
I was a big fan. I remember I was a big fan of Lulu Wang's The Farewell that year that it came out, and I refused to remove Aquafina and Zhao Zhuzhen from my predictions, and then they both didn't get in. I was very
Yep,
mad.
that was rough. That was rough.
And I like Tang Wei in
Yes,
Decision to Leave.
yes, and I also love her in Less Caution as well.
Yes.
Both would have been great. And I would also add in Maggie Chung in The Mood for Love.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And just this last, technically 2 years ago now, but last award cycle with Greta Lee for Past Lives.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that I remember that was a real bubble one too. That's another
Yep.
one that I had in my projections and I refused to move,
Stubborn.
and then it didn't happen.
Yes.
This
Yep.
is I'm always so disappointed. I'm so consistently disappointed by them. I'm like, I see these great performances by Asian actors, and then I put them in my predictions, and I'm like, I'm not moving them, and then I am often wrong. And I'm hoping that there can hopefully come a day where I'm not often wrong.
I agree. Yeah. Jordan, which Best Actress winning character would you most want to do laundry and taxes with?
I think the best answer here is Marge Gunderson from Fargo, because I think
Yeah.
she would be very kind and she would be very helpful, and she could help me out if I got confused on my taxes.
Yeah. She would be very helpful, but in a little bit of a cheeky way. I also think it would be fun to do laundry and taxes with Erin Brockovich. I think we'd have fun. She'd probably be yapping my ear off, but I wouldn't mind.
I think you'd get some great stories from Aaron Brockovich.
Yes, absolutely. Ed Yo, how close do you think Kate and Michelle were to a tie?
Dangerously close. I think this is another one that you really want to see those vote totals for.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I remember advocating for a tie during this award season. Yeah, I think this is maybe the closest since the actual tie in 1968. Would have
Yep.
been fun to have a
Yep.
tie.
That would have been a crazy tie.
Yep. This is from, I don't know if this is OC rap or O crap, but either way. What if Michelle and Kate swapped roles? Do you think Michelle could have done a version of Tar, or could Kate have done a version of Evelyn?
I think a role swap is possible here, but I think it would be harder for Michelle Yeoh to do Tar than it would be for Cate Blanchett to do Everything Everywhere All at Once. I think Cate Blanchett has shown a capacity, like on and off screen, to be silly and goofy and stuff. But I think there's like a very specific sociopathy to the character of Lydia Tarr that is kind of difficult for any real actress to achieve. I mean, like this was very specifically for Cate Blanchett. I think I would say generally, I think a role swap could happen, but these films are so tied to the people that are in them that I think the films would have to kind of be very different.
Yeah, I'm going to say a flat no on this.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I just don't think that either of them would have been great in those particular roles. I think they could have done them. I just think, why complicate it? I don't know.
Right.
I
Yeah,
think
I
it's fine.
it's I think in a very everything everywhere all at once sort of scenario, the Michelle Yeoh version of Tar and the Cate Blanchett version of Everything Everywhere are very, very different from the films that we
Yeah.
have.
Eric Bruns, is Blanchett's performance in Tar the best performance to not win the Oscar for Best Actress?
I think it's in the upper echelon of Best Actress nominees that haven't won, but I did pick out like a few other ones that I thought of
Yeah.
that I think are also like great performances that didn't win, like Kate Winslet in Eternal Sunshine
Hmm.
and Meryl Streep in Bridges of Madison County and Whoopi Goldberg in The Color Purple. I think it's in that same kind of conversation.
Yeah, I think it is up there, but not the best to never win. I mean, it's always going to be Jenna Rollins for me for Woman Under the Influence. People know this. And Whoopi and Glenn, of course, for Dangerous Liaisons. I have to represent that as well.
Mhm.
Joe Lorenzini, if Cate Blanchett's Tar were to meet her idol Leonard Bernstein, played by Bradley Cooper, do you think they'd get along?
I think Bradley Cooper's Leonard Bernstein would initially be very impressed by Lydia Tarr, but maybe suspect something is a little off after spending more time with her.
Yes, I think he would distance himself from her. It would be fun to see Lydia in a more like submissive position because we're so used to her being so dominant. Just
Right.
saying.
I definitely feel like she might, and she might challenge Leonard Bernstein in that scenario. Despite being inspired by him, I feel like Lydia Tarr might honestly be like, well, look at how much I've surpassed what you were able to do.
Wow, goodness. I'd
Which
like to
feels to
see
me that's a kind of egomaniac I feel like Tar is.
crossover event win.
Oh boy.
Uh, Sophia Simonello. As a tar head, I must choose one Best Actress nominee from each decade you've covered so far to push Kaplan and scream, "This is my score, it's my score, you fucking little nothing."
All right, I got the list. You got the list?
Wow, yes. Let's go back and forth with these decades.
Okay, for the 30s I said Greta Garbo.
Wow. I said Marlena Dietrich.
Okay, that feels fair.
So, similar vibe.
For
40s.
the next three feel like the obvious ones. For 40s I said Betty Davis.
Yeah, I wanted to avoid that because it is just so obvious. So I went with Barbara Stanwyck.
Ah,
I
okay.
just think that would be really fun to see her doing that kind of thing.
For
50s.
50s I said Katharine Hepburn.
I said Katharine Hepburn as well. Easy
For
peasy.
for 60s I said Elizabeth Taylor.
I said Greer Garson.
Oh boy.
Specifically at the age she is at in the 60s. I think would be such a hoot to see her doing that.
Fair enough.
And that is just for Sophia. For
For
the 70s?
70s I said Glenda Jackson.
Honorable mention Glenda Jackson, but it's Faye. It has to be Faye Dunaway.
Yep. That
For
feels
me.
like something she's definitely said before.
Yep, that's true. 80s?
For I said Jessica Lange.
Glenn Close.
Yep. Yep. That's that.
Sure. For the 90s?
Sharon Stone.
Oh, yes. Very good. I said Stockard Channing.
Ooh. Oh.
Right?
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah. 2000s.
I said Laura Linney.
Of course. Yes, that would be really incredible. I said Annette Bening.
Yep. Yep.
Mhm.
I feel like they're both two ladies that are likely to yell at me.
Yes, and you would thank them.
Yes, I would.
For the 2010s, what do we got?
I said Viola Davis.
I said Julianne Moore.
Oh.
Lord
yeah.
knows she can scream something, you know.
Yep. Yep.
So, and you want to do the 2020s? I don't know. It's already Kate, but
For
I
the
said,
2020s, I would say Cate Blanchett.
this is where I would say Viola Davis.
Ah.
So, I am manifesting that Viola Davis work with Todd Field challenge.
Ooh, 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 ooh.
Yes, that was fun. Let's see. Dan B, do you see Cate Blanchett winning a third Oscar in the future?
I think of all of the people that have two Oscars, I think she's the most likely candidate to get a third Oscar.
I agree. Bruno, recast the role of Lydia Tarr from an Oscar winning or nominated actress from these decades, 50s, 60s, 70s. We kind of already did that. So I'll do the other question here. If Todd Field announces a fourth movie, who would you cast in the leading role?
So on the off chance that we get another Todd Field film, because I know he rarely makes them, and every time he makes one, he kind of like puffs into smoke and then disappears.
Mm-hmm.
If he comes back and makes another movie, I would either like to see him have uh Jennifer Lawrence as a lead
Oh,
or Amy Adams as a lead.
she needs that. Yeah, she needs that.
I
That's great.
think this is very much the sort of thing that we had mentioned before, where if you see like if you saw the headline, Todd Field doing new movie with Amy Adams, I think there would be a real meltdown.
In a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've said Viola, so that is what I'll say. But, if like I alone had the sole vote, Glenn Close.
Nope.
Sorry.
Well, they, yep.
I mean, like, right?
It'd be like, oh, signed and sealed. Glenn Close
Yep.
is getting that nomination, and she's marching her way to the Oscar.
Yep. Existential rock. Tar rhymes with star. If Deborah Carr had a chance to play this character back in the day, would this have been her Oscar? Something about her in this role makes sense to me. No. I don't think the Academy would have been ready for that. They were barely ready for it a few years ago. In the 50s or 60s, they would not know what to do with Deborah Carr as Lydia Tarr.
Is this like that Back to the Future meme where it's like, you guys don't get it, but your kids are gonna love it?
Yes, that's
Okay.
exactly what it is. Yep.
All right, good.
Celluloid Siren, can you rank all of Kate's nominations?
I realized
Sure.
I had seen all of them except for I'm Not There.
Okay. That's
So I
okay.
have my ranking here. I'm gonna go from top to bottom. I got Tar at number one, followed by Blue Jasmine, followed by Carol, followed by Notes on a Scandal, followed by The Aviator, Elizabeth, and then Elizabeth 2, The Golden Age.
Electric Boogaloo. Yes.
Elizabeth 2, Rise of Gru.
Okay.
I think
Well,
I think Elizabeth and Gru would get along.
Okay. That's
I
on the
want to see
record.
I want to see Elizabeth in the Minions movies. Elizabeth hanging out with the Minions.
Would be fun.
Yep.
I would say Tar number one as well. Number two, Blue Jasmine. Number three, Carol. Number four, Notes on a Scandal. Completely agree with that top four with you. So, five, I do Elizabeth. Six, I'm Not There. Seven, The Aviator. And eight, Elizabeth the Golden Age.
Yep. That nomination is kind of
Superfluous.
yeah, it's a little superfluous.
Yep. Here's a fun one. The possibility of would. If Carla Sofia Gascon, parentheses, alleged in the making, hero of the season, is she living her own Tar moment? Will she have a similar come out and give masterclasses in an Asian country?
My answer to this question is pass.
All I'm going to say is to be continued in the 2024 episode. We shall see.
That'll be a very long segment.
Yes, it will. So much to say. Oh my god. Anyway, Miles McHale, who's the better Marilyn, Anna or Michelle Williams?
I already said this during the segment. Michelle Williams is my preferred Marilyn over Anna de Armas.
My answer to this is Megan Hilty.
Wow, going for the surprise third option, which
Yes.
is also the correct option.
Thank you. But of the two, it's Michelle for me as well. Yeah. Christoph, is Blonde the most misogynistic film to ever receive a Best Actress nomination? I mean, really, when the blowjob scene came up, were you thinking, what am I doing here? Why can't I just turn this off now? Do I really have to finish this? Or did you think that much sooner already?
I was at this point maybe like 30 minutes into this film, and I still had over 2 hours to go. I would say there are you probably would have a better knowledge of this than me, but I would say that there's very few other Best Actress nominees that hate women as much as this movie does.
Yeah, this does feel like the most actively hateful of any nominee I've seen in this category, probably. I'd have to do some digging again into those early years to see if there was some hidden misogyny again, but yeah, of the modern age, not even close. Andrew Carden, why is it so hard to make a successful Marilyn Monroe biopic? Both Blonde and My Week with Marilyn are underwhelming, and HBO's Norma Jean and Marilyn from the 90s wasn't much better.
I already mentioned this a little bit during the
Yeah.
segment, but Marilyn Monroe has a certain quality that's incredibly difficult to replicate. And as a result, most of the biopic performances kind of just feel like cosplay. And honestly, even though like her story is really compelling, I wouldn't be mad if we stopped getting Monroe biopics for a little while. And I, on the record, do not count Smash the Musical. That is a
Okay,
completely different thing that we should just do forever.
of course.
Yep.
Um, and I also just think it's very tempting for certain filmmakers to focus on the iconography of Marilyn rather than the person of Marilyn. So that is why it's not, there's like very rarely been a Marilyn Monroe biopic that people are satisfied with. And they're very protective of her in general. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Just stop doing it. Let her rest.
Yeah. Let her take a nap.
Yeah. Shoshana, I love Marilyn Monroe and genuinely think she's brilliant, from her sparkling appearance in All About Eve to her upstaging one of the greatest actors of his generation in Prince and the Showgirl at every turn. Sorry, Laurence Olivier. What is your favorite Marilyn movie and performance? Let's celebrate the women and their talent, something Blonde failed to do.
I think Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is one of the great comedies, and her pairing with Jane Russell is like really legendary. And the Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend sequence is like one of the most memorable sequences in film history. And
Yeah.
I think the impact that Marilyn Monroe has is that Hollywood is constantly chasing her, even though it's been like 70 years.
Mm-hmm.
And she still has qualities that can't be reproduced.
Yep. It's Some Like It Hot for me. But Gentlemen Prefer Blondes is definitely a close second. Yep. Amar, rank Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend impersonations from worst to best. Madonna, Material Girl, Ana de Armas Blonde, Mira Sorvino, Norma Jean and Marilyn, James Franco, his disastrous Oscar hosting, Ryan Gosling, I'm Just Ken at the Oscars, Blake Lively, Gossip Girl.
I haven't seen half of these, but I do want to shout out one that wasn't mentioned here, which is Margot Robbie in Birds of Prey. Also has a Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend sequence, which I also think is good.
And I would also shout out Rachel Bloom in Crazy Ex-Girlfriend.
Also has a Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend sequence.
Yeah. The Math of Love Triangles. That whole
Yes,
sequence.
yes.
Yes. Either way, James Franco is last.
Yep, always last.
I would put Ryan Gosling, though, pretty high in that group.
Yeah, I mean, like, I wasn't expecting it, and it came out, and it really blew me away.
He is the people's princess. Jake Emmert. Ana de Armas was proof that you could be nominated for a critically panned movie. Do you have a favorite nominated performance from a film you loathe?
I really scoured, like, the nominations list here, and I couldn't find a performance that I liked from a movie I hated.
Okay. Well, I can't really either. I mean, I don't loathe this movie, but I will say La Vie en Rose. I do not enjoy watching that movie at all, but Marion Cotillard's performance is like transcendent. So it is a weird, dichotomy there.
Yeah.
Humphrey Fogart. What old Hollywood actress biopic hasn't been made yet that you'd like to see?
This is an incredibly obvious answer for me personally, and is that there absolutely needs to be an Anna May Wong biopic. I just finished reading a biography about her, and she has a really compelling, interesting, globe-trotting life that has like these really great ups and downs as she goes back and forth between Hollywood and Europe. And I think it's just like the perfect vehicle for somebody. I really think that film should get made.
I agree. And I think they've been trying to get that made, but I don't know
You
why it
would
hasn't.
you would think after the success of Everything Everywhere All at Once that it would have been easier to get that film off the ground. But
Yeah.
I don't know. Hopefully
And
something
Crazy Rich
happens with
Asians.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think Gemma Chan was attached to that at one point. I
Yeah.
don't know if that went anywhere. I would also like to see a Hattie McDaniel biopic.
That would be good. I would see that.
Yeah. I think Monique has been wanting to do that for a while. I think that would be really exciting. Ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson If You Nasty. Is To Leslie truly a small film with a giant heart?
I think To Leslie is a small film with a slightly large heart. I wouldn't call it a giant heart, but I would say it's a bigger than average heart.
I would call it a decent sized heart.
Okay.
I'd say it's a healthy heart.
Okay. It's not dangerously big. It's a
Yeah. And it's not too
it's
small
working.
either.
Yep.
It's
It's not a
It's
small
pumping.
heart. Yep.
Yes.
It's functioning. It is
Okay.
a small film with a functional heart.
There we go. Put that on the poster. Cody Derricks. Were either of you or your guest taking the pre-nomination rumblings and murmurs about To Leslie seriously at all, or were you completely blindsided on nomination morning? Parentheses, insane year.
Yep. So I mentioned it during the segment, but I spent the whole season thinking the To Leslie campaign was a bit, and then I also felt like the nomination was a bit. So
Well, here we are.
I was very much actually blindsided when it happened for real.
I was not seriously entertaining it either. So I thought it would just be like a fun sort of curio with this season. Like, oh, remember when this small group of actors were trying to make Andrea Riseborough happen, but of course it didn't actually happen. But then it actually did happen. So I was like, I don't know how this happened. And here we are.
And here we are.
Miles McHale, all shade aside, Andrea is really, really good in a so-so movie. Was the appeal that they don't really make movies like that anymore? We sort of talked about that.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's definitely the sort of thing that they haven't seen in a while, and maybe that they don't see if they're not watching a lot of movies.
Yep, agreed. Hassan, since To Leslie didn't have a studio campaign, do you think the actors were right to campaign Andrea? And are people faking their hate towards the campaign just because their faves missed?
I don't think they're faking the hate just because their faves missed. I think it was just like such an odd confluence of events around this whole campaign because people hadn't seen anything like it in decades. So it was just a weird thing.
I think there was a weird resentment about this whole idea of like a bunch of actors trying to like rig the system maybe. And also that it was coming at the expense of two black actresses who were on the bubble. I feel like that kind of exacerbated the hate, but it is a shame that some of it like was directed at Andrea herself because like she was involved, but it's not like she was the one like campaigning that much for herself.
Right. Yeah,
So-
the person that was absent from all of this To Leslie campaigning was really Andrea Riseborough.
Right. Laita, after all the campaigning stars did for Andrea and the result it had with her getting the nomination, but with more of a cloud rather than it being seen as an honor, do you think actors are not getting involved if it's not their movie from now on, I guess?
I guess so. I mean, like, there was a very minor few weeks in this current season where Frances Fisher was out there stumping for Lee, and like it didn't really take off. So I don't know
Right.
if the sort of thing that happened for To Leslie is going to happen again for a while.
Yeah. That's what Joey Gentili asked, if this, if her winning, Andrea, if she did win, maybe would open up more a nomination like her or a Carol Kane and Hester Street similarly, or will this just be like once in a blue moon type of thing?
Yeah, I don't think this is something that's going to be happening more often. I think this is something that if we see again anytime soon, I will be very, very surprised.
Yeah. John T. Blanchett, de Armas, and Williams have all been nominated for playing famous classic Hollywood actresses, Hepburn and Marilyn Twice. Who would you have Yeoh and Riseborough play to complete the set?
I think there's a case to be made for Michelle Yeoh playing Anna May Wong at the end of her life because because she only lived to be in her 60s because there was a lot of difficulty transitioning out of old Hollywood. So there would be there's an interesting biopic to be made there. I don't know who Andrea Riseborough could play, but I'm sure there's someone in old Hollywood that she could fit with.
Yeah. Michelle Yeoh, the problem is there weren't a lot of huge Asian actresses, I think, with that kind of prominence to like get that kind of big biopic other than Anna May Wong. But I suppose Nancy Kwan is another one. Andrea Riseborough could literally play anyone.
She is a
But like,
chameleon.
yeah, Betty Davis, sure, she could do that, right?
Sure.
Okay,
Greer Garson. I think you know more
Greer
about
Garson.
the old Hollywood actresses than I do.
Hmm.
I definitely feel like saying Greer Garson is like antagonistic here.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Jeffrey Kerr. Had Michelle Williams gone supporting for the Fabelmans, who do you think she would have kicked out? Also, who do you think would have taken her spot in lead? And then Jimmy Mack wants to know if she would have won in supporting, as did many others. Christoph wants to know if campaigning in lead was a mistake. And Matthew G101 asked if we respect her dedication to being a leading lady star.
Okay, my definitive answer here. If Michelle Williams had gone in supporting, she would have kicked out Jamie Lee Curtis, and she would have won. That would have left a spot open for either
Wow.
Danielle Deadwyler or Viola Davis, and I think that nomination would have gone to Danielle Deadwyler. And I understand her desire to commit to wanting to be a leading lady, but I think supporting would have netted her the win.
Yes. I think there could have been a world where she just sweeps the Critics Awards first and just steamrolls in supporting. So, yeah, I could see it. If she were in supporting, I think she kicks out Hong Chow for The Whale, would be my guess. Um,
You're
she was
probably
kind of
right.
she was kind of on the bubble, you know. Who takes her spot in lead? I think Danielle Deadwyler is a more traditional kind of performance they prefer than Viola Davis, technically, even though they love Viola more, obviously. But yeah, happy she went lead. I like when actors on the borderline do lead, like I said. So, and I am sorry to say that I'm a bit of a snob when it comes to like thinking lead is more meaningful than supporting. So,
Yeah.
that's just me. Malice doesn't live here anymore. 5 noms, 5 losses. Is there an Oscar-winning lead role from history that, if recast with Michelle Williams, would make her undeniable? Or do the stars need to align? Overdue narrative, weak year, unhinged tweets by a competitor to get our girl a trophy.
So I took a look at the winning performances from like the past 20, 22 years to look at something that she like conceivably could have starred in that won. And the one that
Mm-hmm.
I came up with is that I think she could have done Charlize Theron's role in Monster.
Oh my god.
That's the one
Wow.
that that's the one that I thought of because it feels like the most that is not quite in her real wheelhouse, but it feels like the one that she would be most capable of doing. I mean,
Wow.
like her and Charlize are kind of around the same age, and I know
Mm-hmm.
she doesn't have the physicality that Charlize has, but I think if she was offered the role and really worked for it, she could do it.
I would have loved that. That would have been great. I think I did the same thing looking at past Best Actress wins of the past century or so. I think a perfect role for her would have been Brie Larson's role in Room.
Yeah, that's another one that I thought about doing. I think that's a really good one.
Yeah,
I
that
agree.
is so in her wheelhouse. Yeah. Captain Jimmy D, this is the third time that 2 lead actresses with the same first name have been nominated in the same year. Julie Andrews and Julie Christie in 1965, Jessica Lange and Jessica Tandy in 1989, and Michelle Yeoh and Michelle Williams here. Which actress's filmography do you prefer over the other?
Oh, so like which actress do I prefer over Michelle Yeoh and Michelle Williams, or which actress do I prefer in these
In those
duos?
combinations? Yeah.
I
The
think
filmography of.
Michelle Williams is my choice.
No, I mean, like, which of the two
Oh,
in each
between
combination do you prefer?
okay, so
Like, do you prefer Julie Andrews or Julie Christie?
I prefer
Filmography
Julie
wise,
Andrews over Julie Christie,
I
and
prefer Julie Christie in terms of filmography.
I prefer Jessica Lange over Jessica Tandy,
Certainly.
and I prefer Michelle Yeoh over Michelle Williams.
I think I slightly prefer Michelle Williams' films just because I've seen more of them, but getting there with Yo.
Okay,
Ethan David ranked Michelle Williams' Best Actress nominations.
we got the three, right?
Yeah.
It's Blue Valentine, The Fabelmans, and My Week with Marilyn.
For me, it's number 1 Blue Valentine, and then My Week with Marilyn, and then The Fabelmans.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think Blue Valentine is easily the best.
It's easy. It's not only like the best of hers, but I think it's well, it's for me like top 20
Hmm. Of what? All time? Like,
of
what are we
of
talking
the
here?
of the category.
Okay.
Granted, I
Wow.
haven't seen as many as you, so it's top 20 of the
Um,
ones I've seen.
okay. Glorfindel of Gondolin, recast these 5 nominated roles with leading ladies from the films of Alfred Hitchcock.
I'm not as familiar, so this one is one that I couldn't really figure out.
Okay. I'm going to say Ingrid Bergman in Tar. How about that?
Okay.
The idea of any of Marilyn's, like, contemporaries playing her is very weird to me. I don't really want to do that, but Grace Kelly, I don't know.
I think who should have played Marilyn Monroe in Blonde is Marilyn Monroe, but change the
Marilyn
movie
Monroe.
so that it's better.
I'll put Eva Marie Saint in To Leslie.
Okay.
I'll put Tippi Hedren in The Fabelmans.
Okay, yeah.
And I'll put Julie Andrews in Everything Everywhere.
Oh, that's fun. I think that would be a real hoot.
Yeah. Joey Gentili, recast these 2020's Oscar talents and Karen Black in these roles. Yoon Ye-jung, Jessica Chastain, Demi Moore, Monica Barbaro.
All right. So I have Karen Black into Leslie.
Obviously.
I have Jessica Chastain in The Fabelmans.
Mm-hmm.
I have Yu Jung in Everything Everywhere. I have Monica Barbaro in Blonde, and I have Demi Moore doing Lydia Tarr.
I have the exact same combination.
Perfect. Great.
I think
that's the
correct
ideal
solution. Yes.
We finished the puzzle.
Sometimes these questions from Joey feel like a puzzle, and I feel like that is the solution.
Yep, we put it together.
Yep. So sorry, Monica Barbaro, you have to do Blonde. But,
sorry.
Yeah. Chels, obligatory Survivor questions. Who's the comp beast? Who finds all the idols? Who flips and backstabs the most? Who has the best social game? Who wins?
Okay, I got this one. Evelyn Wong is the winner. She's a comp beast. She's got a great story for Final Tribal. Lydia Tarr has a Russell Hantz downside. She's extremely aggressive player who makes it to the end through treachery, and then nobody votes for her. Marilyn Monroe, I think, has a good social game. I think she could just be generally like magnetic, and I think she would be easier to work with if she's not living and working in Hollywood and surrounded by awful people.
That's true.
Let's do Marilyn Monroe a favor and remove her from the United States of America and put her on an island. I think she would actually fare well.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mitzi Fabelman does well, but I definitely feel like she's like a purple edit. Like she's kind of on the show, and then she like is like the second merge boot.
Okay.
Leslie from To Leslie is eliminated on episode 2.
Oh no! Flame out.
She's kind of a kook, and then she gets super paranoid, and then they vote her out.
Okay. Well, I'll just say this does not strike me as a super athletic group, so I don't know if we're having a lot of physical threats here. I suppose if Evelyn has some of those martial arts skills still in her, she could do pretty well. I think weirdly Leslie is very good at finding idols.
Ooh.
I could just see it. I could see it for her. Not that it would mean she would win or anything, but she could be sneaky. Lydia is absolutely flipping and backstabbing her way to the end, but I could also see her being an absolute hypocrite when anyone tries to backstab her.
Yep.
I think Marilyn Monroe, yes, does have a really good social game. I don't know if she would win necessarily, but I could definitely see her being very well liked. But I think Evelyn feels like the most well-rounded she has the right package, I think, to win.
Yep. I'd agree.
Yeah. And then the other question, of course, cast these 5 roles as the Black Widow Brigade: Parvati, Amanda, Suri, Natalie, and Alexis.
I got this. Lydia Tarr,
to anyone who doesn't watch Survivor, but yes.
Lydia Tarr is the Parvati. Evelyn Wong is the Suri. Marilyn Monroe is the Alexis. I'd say Leslie is the Natalie Bolton. And that leaves Mitzi Fabelman as the Amanda Kimmel from Survivor China, Survivor Micronesia, and Survivor Heroes versus Villains.
Thank you. Wow. Beautiful. Well, I mean, I had Evelyn as Parvati, who's kind of struggling in the beginning, but comes on strong at the end.
Yeah.
I have Mitzi as Amanda, kind of flip-flops and a little too emotional and very messy in her final tribal speech.
Yep.
I'd say Lydia is Suri, kind of a mastermind type of thing, and she has some fans who yell about how she should have won.
Yep.
Leslie is Natalie Bolton. very unassuming for most of the season until she suddenly appears out of nowhere with aggressive energy, much like
Yep.
Andrea Riseborough in her nomination.
Yes, very, very, very true.
Yes, and Marilyn is Alexis, a part of the team, well liked, but is like surprisingly cut short.
Yeah, she's like the one you kind of forget about that's
Yeah,
there, but she was there.
she was there. Adam, create a lineup of presenters, 2008-2009 style.
All right, I got mine here.
Okay,
I have Halle Berry for Michelle Yeoh.
which she did anyway, basically. Yeah.
Yep. I have Kathy Bates for Cate Blanchett.
Ooh, love it.
I have Jessica Lange for Andrea Riseborough.
That makes sense.
I have Renee Zellweger for Anna de Armas.
Okay,
Because that's
sure.
two people playing old Hollywood people.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
and in something I didn't plan but did end up coming up here, I have Brie Larson for Michelle Williams.
Well, there you go. It's fate.
Yep,
I love it.
there it is.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Yeah. Well, I have for Cate Blanchett, I have her old buddy Sandra Bullock, Ocean's 8 connection, also 2013 connection. For Ana de Armas, I said Marion Cotillard, just for the connection of like a crossover star finding success in Hollywood. For Andrea Riseborough, obviously Kate Winslet, her bestie, who proclaimed her performance to be, and I quote, one of the greatest performances she's ever seen.
That that is an absurd statement to make.
Yes, it is. And they've worked
she's
together.
she's spending too much time in that James Cameron tank.
Yes, losing oxygen. For Michelle Williams, I think that's where we put in last year's winner, Jessica Chastain. And then Michelle Yeoh, Halle Berry.
Yep.
History making. Yeah, very good. A few more here. Liam, would you have preferred to have Viola Davis and or Danielle Deadwyler in this lineup? And who would you cut to make room for one or both of them?
So I like The Woman King as a movie more than Till, but I would have preferred Danielle Deadwyler to get the nomination here.
I would too, but I would nominate both of them anyway.
And I think you can easily cut Anna de Armas and Andrea Riseborough from this to put both of them in there, for me personally.
I'm cutting Anna de Armas, and I'm also cutting Michelle Williams.
Okay.
I'm keeping Andrea, baby.
All right. You're riding that to Leslie train.
Yes, let's go.
You're riding the train to Leslie.
Very good. Joshua McNeil, why was The Woman King and Viola Davis completely shut out of the Oscars? The film should have gotten some recognition even in the below-the-line categories.
I had predicted The Woman King and Below the Lines during the season, like in costume and production design and things like that, and Viola Davis. I think...
And picture, for me, too.
And, yep. I think
honestly,
something that came up that kind of is one of those things that just blew out of nowhere, as things are kind of want to do in the last like couple months of the season, is All Quiet on the Western Front just showed up out of nowhere. Netflix, and
and
it just surged at the right moment, and I think it took a lot of nominations that, in my opinion, kind of maybe should have gone to The Woman King. But it's that kind of movie is so their kind of film, that I think it just kind of, it was easy to put in there, and I think it's kind of a bummer.
I think the film was weirdly seen as like not serious enough. Like it was seen as a good action blockbuster. Like we talked about Viola's lack of a nomination and the film being shut out on an episode of A Woman Robbed, me and Luca Giliberti. So more thoughts on that episode. With Viola herself, I think it is a great performance, but it is definitely not a traditional acting type of showcase, you know? So I think that was the issue for her, sadly.
Right.
Next level, Lenamine. Do you think it will have to take a black actress to be the lead of a Best Picture winner to win Best Actress again?
I kind of want to say yes. I mean, cynically, yes.
I know. What does it have to take? I know. There are so many that, you know, even if like
they struggle
Danielle Deadwyler,
they struggle to even nominate them, let alone
like the thing.
Yeah. So it's
there are
tough.
many. Yeah. Well, both Lacombe and Andrew Carden want to know who was sixth between the two of them, because it was absolutely going to be one of them. Who was sixth?
I said Deadweiler.
I said Viola.
Ooh.
I think, for one thing, I do think they actually watched The Woman King. I remember some rumors that voters didn't even want to watch Till, so that is a possibility.
Yep, already.
And
kind
Viola
of a
was
problem.
nominated literally at every major precursor, so that's why I think maybe sixth for Viola, but yeah, could be Danielle. Much baitier. Amanda BW, Daniel Deadweiler and Viola Davis should have been in this lineup. Recast them in any of these 5 roles.
I said that Danielle Deadweiler could do to Leslie. I would have liked to see
Absolutely.
that. That's a great.
Yes.
That would have been a great role for her.
Yes,
And I would hope that she would have been nominated in that case.
she wouldn't have.
Yeah. And
Sorry.
of all the films here, I think Viola Davis is the best possibility in Tar.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep reiterating.
Viola Davis as Tar. Good.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep, would love to see it. Russell Aaron, I'm all in on Michelle Yeoh, but still upset that 2 worthy performances by black actresses got the shaft, so let's recast the other 4 nominees with the following living Best Actress nominees, black Best Actress nominees: Cynthia Erivo, Angela Bassett, Ruth Negga, and Gabourey Sidibe. Sure.
All right, I'm saying Gabourey Sidibe into Leslie.
Yes, same for me.
I'm going to say Angela Bassett in Tar.
Yes.
I'm going to say Ruth Negga in The Fabelmans and Cynthia Erivo in Blonde. That one's a little tougher. Did you reverse
Yeah,
those
it's
two?
tough. Yes, I did.
Okay.
I mean, Ruth Negga basically did like a little bit of that in passing. Remember?
Oh yeah.
Evoking that style. So
Yep.
I think she could do that pretty easily.
Yeah.
Not that I would want to subject Ruth Negga to Blonde, but
I don't want
those are my options.
Yeah, I feel bad all these people that we said congrats to. Ruth Negga and Monica Barbaro. You have to do a Blonde.
Yes. Last question. Greg Cratemean, Mia Goth gave the greatest performance of 2022 in Pearl. The monologue near the end is amazing. And all the talk about Andrea's transformation, look at Mia in an interview and then watch her in Pearl. That's a transformation. If Frances Fisher pushed for Mia, would she have been nominated?
I just want to talk. I haven't seen any of the Mia Goth films, but I do want to say that yes, when you watch Mia Goth in an interview, she sounds like a little Cockney orphan. So that's certainly a transformation.
It is. If Frances Fisher pushed for Mia Goth, I can't see a version of any world where that happens, but I think not, honestly. I just think Andrea being such a classic sort of character actor working for so long, that just had a certain appeal to it. So there you go.
I agree.
Okay, let's get to our final segment where we'll reveal who we think was the runner-up in this Best Actress race. You can just go ahead and say it now.
The runner-up is Cate Blanchett as Lydia Tarr in Tar.
Yes. I don't think you even need to explain. Right?
Nope. I don't have to explain it. It's Lydia Tarr in Tar.
It's Cate Blanchett in Tar.
Cate Blanchett is Lydia Tarr in Tar by Tar Field.
Get ready for Tar. That's what it should have said on the poster. Like, get ready for Ricky and the Flash.
Get ready for the Tar apocalypse.
Oh, God. Yes. Cate Blanchett, one of the top 10 most obvious runners-up in the history of Best Actress. Not a single one of these others was even close. Genuinely. Yeah.
It's like Michelle Yeoh, and then like 10 feet behind her, Cate Blanchett, and then like half a mile behind her, somebody else.
Yeah. Well, final question. Who would you have voted for from this lineup?
I would have voted for Michelle Yeoh in Everything Everywhere All at Once. I like her filmography in the past, and I think it is an exciting and innovative performance, and I think it's an exciting and innovative win, and I think it pushes forward the idea of what Best Actress can be.
Wow. You know, this is a very tough call for me. I will maintain that this should have been a tie, but it's Michelle Yeoh for me as well. She would have gotten my vote. I would have been just very easily on the Michelle Yeoh train if I was a voter. Very hyped up to see her having this moment. It is such an exciting, one-of-a-kind performance to even be nominated, so would gladly give her my vote for this. So there you go.
Great
Congrats,
year.
Michelle.
Great year.
Fun year to discuss.
Yep.
Thank you so much for doing this. This was such a fun blast talking about 2 years ago.
Yeah. And now I know how much work it is to do all this stuff many, many, many times. Many times.
95 times.
95 times. A few more to go.
I know. But yes, thanks for coming back on the show. Where can people find more of you if they want to follow you?
If you want to follow me, don't bother following me on Twitter because I'll probably stop posting there shortly. But you can follow me on Letterboxd, where I post what we're watching here every single day, and that's at Sebasgronback on Letterboxd.
Very good. Thank you all so much for listening. You could find me on all platforms at Kevin_Jacobson. Some at just Kevin Jacobson. Shows at Oscar Runner Up on Twitter, Instagram, and Blue Sky, and the runner-up is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you heard and want to hear more, go to patreon.com/andtherunnerup is, where you can hear a whole bunch of bonus episodes. Next week, we'll be discussing the Best Actress lineup of 2023, where the nominees were Annette Bening in Naiad, Lily Gladstone in Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller in Anatomy of a Fall, Carey Mulligan in Maestro, and Emma Stone in Poor Things, with the winner being Emma Stone. The end is near. So with that, thanks again, Seb.
I'm going to bed.
Good night, and I will bid you all adieu.